your seat, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. It is 9:30 and we shall begin. This is the inaugural meeting of the Emergency and Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. So welcome. We do have our agenda before us today, and before we begin, I will ask the committee coordinator to begin with a roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hubley. Councillor Johnson.
She's in the building.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Lulov.
Je suis ici.
Conseiller Plante.
Je suis là.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 2 on our agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Leff?
I, Councillor Matthew Luff, declare potential deemed pecuniary interest on the following portions of the 2023 Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee draft operating budget. Emergency Protective Services, Fire Services, Operating Resource Requirement, Communications, which is on page 6 of the EPPS budget book. As my spouse is employed by Versatern Public Safety, a software firm that provides services to Ottawa Fire Services, and would receive funding from or would potentially receive funding from these budget line items. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lulov. Are there any other declarations? Seeing none. Item 3 is the confirmation of minutes. The first set is from our June 16th, 2022 meeting. Are those meeting minutes carried? Thank you. And the second set is also from June 16th, the CPSC meeting. Are those meeting minutes carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next items on our agenda, item 4.1 is the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee terms of reference. Does this need to be held for anyone, or can we carry this?
We can carry it, Chair.
That item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Item 5 is our budget, and I do believe we have a budget presentation that will be provided, so we will hold this item, 5.1. And 6 is the referral motion, Councillor Devine's motion to support Bill 47, Protecting Human Rights in an Emergency Act 2022. We will hold this item as well. Okay, with that now behind us, we will go to Mr. Rogers, who will provide a presentation on the 2023 draft operating and capital budget for the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services. Did General Manager Ayat wish to start with some opening comments? Okay. So it appears that the row here has no microphone power. So we'll just take a moment. Okay, let's wait for you to get power first so people can hear.
It was working. Oh, testing, mine's working.
I believe the mic is on now, and I'll be starting the presentation, and then we'll pass it on to Cyril in a moment. Thank you, Chair Brockington. Today, we'll be presenting our draft 2023 budget for the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. We will then hear from public delegations. Staff are available to answer questions from members of committee as committee considers the relevant portions of the draft 2023 budget, operating and capital budgets, and forward its recommendations to council, sitting as a committee as a whole for consideration at the meeting to be held on March 1st. Today, next slide. Great. This is the agenda of our presentation today, as I just spoke to. Next slide. Today, we are presenting the draft budget for all emergency and protective service areas. Je suis accompagné par mes collègues. Roger Chapman, directeur des services et règlements municipaux.
My colleagues, Roger Chapman, Brian Perot, General Manager's Office, Technical Support and Activities, and the head of the Fire Department of Ottawa, Pierre Poirier, Paramedic Department of Ottawa, Valier Vietlo, Public Policy Development, and Public Safety Department.
Financial Officer Cyril Rogers present the operating and capital budget summaries and the capital funding sources.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, Chair, members of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee. So today I'm here with my colleagues to present the 2023 draft operating and capital budget for EPS. The overall net requirement for EPS committee budget is $246 million, which reflects an overall increase of $9.9 million in comparison to the 2022 budget. The GM's Office and Business Technical Support Service budget is increasing by $85,000, which is primarily related to cost of living increments and benefit adjustments. Public Safety Service is increasing by $600,000, which is also related to cost of living increments and benefit adjustments. The Fire Services increases is also reflective of cost of living increments, benefits, and inflationary increases related to fleet for fleet-related inflationary costs such as maintenance and fuel. Paramedic increases are also related to compensation and cost of living increases, fleet-related inflationary pressures, as well as the growth of additional 14 paramedic resources in 2023. The bylaw and public policy increases are also related to cost of living adjustments for increments and benefits and inflationary pressures related to fleet and materials. Next slide, please. The overall draft 2023 budget for EPS services is $13 million. $8.5 million is related to the renewal of EPS capital assets, mainly for equipment and life cycle across all the emergency services areas, in addition to building related infrastructure and renewal costs for all the service areas as well. $4 million is for growth. This is mainly for the capital related to the paramedic vehicles and equipment in support of the additional 14 paramedics in 2023, as well as some additional capital for the new fire station in Canada North. Next slide, please. The capital funding for the EPS capital budget is broken down $8.1 million from reserves, or 62%, which is funded from the cash reserves, $1 million related to debt, funded by debt, $3.4 million for development charges, funding the growth in the paramedic capital requirements and the Canada North Fire Station, and as well as there's a small component related to revenue, which is reflective of the grants for the CBRN and USAR grant for 2023. I will now pass it back to Kim.
Thank you, Cyril. In the Emergency and Protective Services operating budget, dans le budget fonctionnement du service de protection d'urgence, there are adjustments totaling $5.56 million for potential contract settlements, increments, and benefit changes. These are cost of living allowances being factored in for staff compensation costs. 82% of the Emergency Protective Services operating budget is allocated to compensation. There's $1.7 million in fleet costs related to inflation on compensation contracts, parts, fuel, contribution to capital reserve, and maintenance. The department is making investments in its equipment and infrastructure to ensure climate resiliency and emergency response readiness. My colleagues will touch base on these projects in their portions of the presentation. 2022 costs associated with the protest and continued COVID-19 emergency response are partially offset by provincial and federal funding. I'll now pass it over to Roger Chapman, who will review some high-level slides for bylaw services. He is online.
Mr. Chapman, just want to confirm you're with us.
Can you hear us, Roger?
I see Mr. Chapman speaking online, but we do not have audio.
Chair, if you'll just give us one moment to see if there's an issue with the room or with Mr. Chapman's audio, and we can go from there.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear him online either.
Councillor Luloff, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you, but not Mr. Chapman. So it seems like it's not just room audio. Just wanted to let you know, Madam Clerk.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chapman, perhaps you could,
Can you hear me now?
yes, there we go.
Sorry about that.
Excellent. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so Bylaw and Regulatory Services has a gross operating budget of $27 million, which is offset by a projected $32.1 million in revenue from user fees. 76% of this budget is allocated towards salaries, wages, and benefits. This includes $405,000 in cost of living, increments, and benefit adjustments. It also includes $125,000 in fleet-related inflation. Next slide, please. Bylaw and Regulatory Services capital budget of $76,000 for replacement of critical tools and equipment, including measuring devices such as heat, moisture, noise, and electrical meters, ballistic vests, animal control equipment, and IT equipment. There is also a $200,000 allocated for life cycle and renewal work for the existing city facility, which houses Bylaw and Regulatory Services headquarters. This component of the corporate building and parks program. That concludes my slides.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Ryan Perone, the Business and Technical Support Services branch for EPS. So the General Manager's Office and Business and Technical Support Services branch has a gross operating budget of $4.7 million, which is entirely covered by property taxes. 97% of this budget is allocated towards salaries, wages, and benefits. This branch manages a large number of projects on behalf of our service areas, as well as the legislative agenda, and supports the implementation of corporate programs. Further, the branch also includes Event Central, which issues special event permits and film permits. We have observed that most of the annual events have returned to pre-pandemic levels, and the number of filming permits have increased 22% since the film bylaw came into force, resulting in $5,000 in revenue. Nous avons observé que la plupart des événements annuels sont revenus au niveau d'avant
Most
la
annual event came back to the pre-pandemic level. The number of filming has increased 22% since the new regulation on filming, with revenues of $5,000.
Is related to the derecho extreme weather event from last May.
Thank you very much. The Ottawa Fire Service has a gross operating budget of $182.7 million, which is almost entirely covered by property taxes. 90% of the budget is allocated towards salary, wages, and benefits. This includes $685,000 in increase in costs related to fleet inflation, compensation contracts, parts, fuel, capital reserves, and maintenance. There's also $200,000 allocated for the purchase of a second set of bunker gear for our new recruits and to cover the inflationary costs with life cycling of this bunker gear. The NFPA, or National Fire Protection Association, requires the replacement of fire bunker gear every 10 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. In the capital highlights, the Ottawa Fire Service capital budget has $2.7 million towards the Canada North station. Funds were allocated the last 3 years towards this project, which will service the Canada North and South March. There's also $3.1 million in life cycling of replacements, including $630K of fire alerting and paging system replacements for the fire service. This is integral for effective and timely responses for the career and volunteers to emergency calls. There's also $250,000 allocated towards the installation of backup generators for fire stations. The backup generators provides a major contribution to building climate resiliency to severe weather events and power outages. In addition, there is $321,000 in the budget to continue the transition of fire service equipment to battery operated to replace the fuel operated equipment that we have. In 2022, the Ottawa Fire Service successfully piloted high powered fans, saws, rescue drills, and we continue to do that in the transition in 2023. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Good morning, Pierre Poirier with the Ottawa Paramedic Service. The gross operating budget for the paramedic service is just over 130 million. Of note is 50% funding by the province for the ambulance side, whereas the Central Ambulance Communication Center is 100% funded by the province. We're happy that this year we're having an additional 14 staff, and the cost is about 1.6 million. There's an increase in our fleet costs of 920,000, and significant has been the continued support by the province for our community paramedic programs, almost $5 million. Next slide. On the capital side, we continue to maintain the public access defibrillator program, where there's over 1,200 public access defibrillators in the community. We also have $300,000 for life cycle replacement, particularly of our electronic medical record. And of note is also $500,000 for the replacement of other medical equipment for the Ottawa Paramedic Service. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Valerie Bietlow. I'm the Manager of Public Policy Development, or PPD for short. PPD's gross operating budget is $825,000, 97% of which is allocated towards salaries, wages, and benefits. PPD is responsible for recommending and developing public policy to committee and council, including conducting bylaw reviews of those matters and bylaws within the purview of the Emergency and Protective Services Department. Thank you.
We'll now go to Beth Gooding, who's also online.
Good morning, I'm Beth Gooding, the Director of the Public Safety Service. We have a gross budget of 14.9 million, and I will highlight that it's a little bit different from that of the other services in EPS because we do a lot more contracting. Just as a quick reminder, the Public Safety Service does 4 things. We do emergency management, corporate security, corporate radio, and the 911 service. And for 3 out of those 4, we do heavy contracting. That includes contracting for security guard services, for our corporate radio network with Bell Mobility Radio, and with the Ottawa Police Service for 911. The inflationary increases that you're seeing on the slide here were known to us in advance. The 320,000 related to corporate radio system was part of our contract with Bell Mobility Radio. And the 290,000 increase in 911 relates to a compensation adjustment following a negotiated bargaining agreement for the union representing the 911 operators. Next slide. So these are our capital highlights. It really is just to maintain our equipment, with the bulk of the spending being dedicated to maintenance of our security systems, including things like CCTV, intrusion detection, and access control. And je pense avec ça, je vais passer la parole à Kim.
I'll now give the mic to Kim for the conclusion.
Voici ce qui conclut notre présentation.
This concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, General Manager Ayot and Acting City Treasurer Rogers for the presentation, and your entire team for putting together our draft budget. Before I yield the floor to the public delegate, I would like to ask Vice Chair Hill to read the budget motion onto the record. Vice Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee recommend that Council, sitting as Council Committee, approve the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee 2023 draft operating and capital budgets as follows. 1. Emergency and Protective Services Department, General Manager's Office and Business Support Services, Operating Resource Requirement, page 1. 2. Public Safety Service as follows. A. User fees, page 4. B. Operating Resource Requirements, page 3. 3. Ottawa Fire Service as follows. A. User fees, pages 7 to 9. B. Operating Resource Requirement, page 6 as follows. I. Communications, II. Remaining Fire Services Operating Resource Requirement. 4. Ottawa Paramedic Service as follows. A. User fees, page 12. B. Operating Resource Requirement, page 11. 5. Bylaw and Regulatory Services as follows. A. User fees, pages 15 to 24. B. Operating Resource Requirements, page 14. 6. Public Policy Development, Operating Resource Requirement, page 26. 7. Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Capital Budget, pages 27 to 29. Individual projects listed on pages 48 to 70.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Now we'll turn to public delegations, and it's my understanding we do have a delegation from Mr. Dave Andre, President, Ottawa Professional Firefighters Association. Welcome, Mr. Andre. Just press the button in front of you. Have we lost power again? There he goes. There you go. Good morning. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Merci. Good morning. My name is David Andre. I'm the president of the Ottawa Professional Firefighters Association and represent the 952 members who are full-time firefighters with Ottawa Fire Services. Bonjour, je m'appelle David Andre et je suis le président de l'Association des pompiers professionnels d'Ottawa et je représente les 952 membres à temps plein du service des incendies d'Ottawa. While the word fire is in the title, we probably provide much more than fire services to the residents of Ottawa. We attend medical incidents, automobile accidents, industrial accidents, water rescues, high-angle rescues, confined space rescues, hazmat calls, collapse rescues, trench rescues, and not initially included, but gas leaks after this morning, and anything else you can think of. We're an all-hazard response. If it doesn't fit in any other checkbox, send the fire department. A recent freeze-thaw cycle saw the station on King Edward and Laurier respond to 42 calls in one 24-hour period. Over 20 of those calls were for broken pipes or flooding. Our members are glad to help in any way they can, whether it be pulling you from a fire or finding the shutoff to your water to avoid further damage from flooding. While the OPFFA, or the Ottawa Professional Firefighters Association, is cognizant of the current budget pressures, we would like this committee to consider the needs of the Ottawa Fire Services. Our hope is to work collaboratively with the Fire Services Management Team to increase staffing in areas currently being filled by overtime or by our members doing more and more until they hit a breaking point. Staffing models that have served Ottawa Fire Service well for decades are no longer sufficient. Let me explain. Generally, a one-pump fire station would require 4 members per platoon for each platoon, plus 1 member per platoon to cover vacation, lieu day leave, and sick leave. That's a total of 20 full-time equivalents. Today, that same fire station will require at least 21 full-time equivalents. Why the additional members, you ask? Remember, the reality is improvements to the Employment Standards Act means we have more members off on parental leave. I believe at one time last year, that number represented over 40 members. These are not members abusing leave. These are members making use of leave brought forth by legislation. Another reason is the City of Ottawa has had many programs advocating for mental health and reaching out to get help. We applaud those initiatives and the improvements we have seen in our collective agreement to arbitration for mental health benefits. However, that means more members off on leave getting the help they need to ensure they can one day return to work. I can assure you, when I started Ottawa Fire Service in 2001, fathers taking parental leave and mental health leave was almost unheard of. Realities in most workplaces, and we are no different. If anything, studies show we are at a heightened risk of developing mental health injuries. Toronto Fire Services have acknowledged that new reality and will be hiring up to 200 firefighters in 2023, 52 of which are newly created positions. Their 3-year plan is to add 156 new positions. Our training division is staffed with 12 members who deliver and prepare training for all Ottawa firefighters. They are under immense pressure every year to deliver more with the same number of staff. This is not a long-term solution. The safety and well-being of our members and the public they serve starts with training. This division is the foundation upon which every firefighter hired by Ottawa Fire Services begins their career. This division of only 12 employees that are asked to do so much with so little are tasked with not only train up to 3 groups of recruits per year to compensate for attrition. Now the norm has been 2 groups for the last few years. Are also tasked with ensuring that our current members meet the high standards set by this council and rightfully demanded by the taxpayers of the City of Ottawa. Our maintenance division and radio depot, which provides all the equipment and repairs, as well as the distribution and cleaning of personal protective equipment and so much more, has 4 full-time equivalents.
1 minute.
They could also use additional staff to meet the ever-changing growing needs of the Ottawa Fire Services. What is most frustrating to our members is that our operations division has gone from a high of 905 over the last 10 years to our current number of 859. This is based on OFS 2020 annual report. The reality is we have less staff now than ever. Our overtime budget for 21-22 fiscal year was over $6 million. Our members continue to proudly staff the trucks and answer the call and protect the great citizens and guests to our beautiful city. But this comes at a great physical and mental toll to our members. They're exposed to more traumatic events, toxic exposures, and physical injuries. Mental health and cancer claims are on the rise for our firefighters. Proper staffing can reduce all these exposures. While we're encouraged by the following budget lines, Ottawa West Fire Station expansion, Canada North, the time has come to make both items a reality. We'll skip to this. As firefighters, it's a privilege to serve the people of this great city. These additional resources for our growing city will serve us better, will help us better serve your constituents. On behalf of the members of the OPFFA who serve this community with both pride and professionalism, I'd like to thank you for your time and taking into consideration the concerns we have. I also want to thank the Chair of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Service Committee, Councillor Riley Broxton, for taking the time out of his busy schedule to meet with me a couple of weeks ago and discuss our priorities going forward. I'd be happy to personally meet with any other committee member to discuss our priorities and concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andre, for your presentation. Before you go, I do have at least one question, and I'll yield to Councillor Johnson.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your presentation today. And thank you to all of your members for what is going on right now in the East End and being able to serve those communities that are affected. So thank you. I just wanted to sort of probe a bit more on the question of mental health. First of all, babies are always good news. So people going off on leave for parental leave is fabulous. But when it comes to the issues of mental health, I mean, most certainly I can understand that the work that's being done is traumatic in nature, can be traumatic in nature. And so it's in fact exposure on the job that would contribute to mental health. But is there anything else that this committee should understand when it comes to the systems that are being created by budgetary pressures or other impacts that would further ask our members who are serving to take a mental health leave? Are there other factors other than just what's happening on the job site in the way that we're creating their work conditions?
It's a good question. I believe most of it is probably related to the calls we go to. I guess our fear is over the long term, we may see effects of mental health if certain divisions are demanded to do more and more every year with the same amount of staff. But I believe currently most of our mental health issues would be related to traumatic experiences on calls or what they see and what they do on a daily basis.
So sorry, Mr. Chair, may I follow up? So with that in mind, what you're suggesting is in fact, financial support through human resources would be the appropriate intervention to support your members who are looking for mental health supports.
Correct. So as I stated, when I got hired in 2001, the calls were no different. The difference was it wasn't, I guess, okay to publicly talk about those calls. Now it's become okay to publicly talk about it, and in many instances to get help, to become better people at the end of the day and return to work as fully functioning firefighters. You're welcome.
Thank you. I have Councillor Desroches and then Councillor Plante.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you. Merci pour votre présentation. You sped up near the end there. I know you were working to get within the limit. Is there one or two points that you missed that you wanted to cover very quickly?
I do appreciate that lob over here. What we did skip over is that our current situation at Station 45, which is Canada North, is 2 members. And a recent arbitration award in Sudbury did state that for safety reasons, career firefighters should be responding with a minimum of 4. We've seen that in the budget for many years. Now, I don't blame this council or Ottawa Fire Services. I think there's been delays in construction that are completely out of our control. What I was going to suggest is that we look at adding 4 members to that station as soon as possible. Having worked at that station as an acting captain at the time, the first thing you think of in the morning is if we get a fire, what are we doing? Now, procedures clearly state that we don't enter until another crew of 2 arrives. But I believe that's a very difficult position for our members to be in if you had somebody screaming for help and, policy dictates that you wait outside. So I think we can all avoid that by adding those extra 2 members per shift as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks, Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor. Conseiller Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Attends, je vais juste baisser la main. Merci.
Thank
Merci
you.
beaucoup.
Thank you also for the presentation. I live close to the station you mentioned on King Edward and Laurier, and I know that it is a very busy station. You answer many calls, and I'd like to thank you for that. I essentially have 2 questions. One is a little more complicated than the other. In the budget, maybe I missed it when I read the notes for today, but do you, for instance, we have a situation with the Panda game, It takes a lot of resources from the ambulances, police, paramedics and all. Do you have in your budget, line by line, are there things that are very specific, like for Canada Day, St. Patrick's Day? And second, and this is a more complicated question, you said that you don't necessarily answer fire calls here in the city of Ottawa. Could you talk about the opioids crisis and how it impacts your daily work life at the fire department? We don't necessarily think about that, opioids and fire, but there's somebody that was really impacted by this crisis, especially in my ward. So thank you very much. Those were my 2 questions. I'll start with the second question because I didn't really understand the first one. I am an officer at King Edward and Laurier Station, so you can come in for a visit anytime. As for the opioids crisis, sincerely, and I'll use the past weekend here, several of the medical calls we get are for people in need after consuming any kind of drug, really. Of course, these calls are increasing, and our colleagues at the paramedic department know that. It requires more and more resources. And this weekend, for instance, we needed more equipment, but they were surprised by what we were asking because they're not used to getting so many overdose calls. It's like that at every shift. Depending on the product on the street, there are many, many calls. And could you repeat the first question because I didn't understand everything?
As you know, because you work in the best ward in the city, we have some very specific events that are very taxing on our emergency services. And I'm just going to specifically reference the Panda game in Sandy Hill. And I know, by the way, Canada Day and St. Patrick's, those also are big events around the city, but I'm just specifically talking about Panda. Is it possible, do you guys keep line items based on specific events? Because in a couple of weeks, I will be meeting with the presidents of Carleton and University of Ottawa and the councillor in Capital Ward to discuss the Panda game. And I was just wondering, how much does that cost you guys to staff up for an event like the Panda game?
Well, yeah, that's right. And we'll get to that in just 1 second. Councillor, do you mind asking that to staff and when we get there in just a few minutes?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for our delegate? Thank you, Mr. Andre, for your presentation, for your service of your members. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. It's my understanding there are no other delegations. All right. Questions for staff on the budget. Councillor Luloff, please begin.
Thank you very much. My first question, I suppose, is for Roger and Valerie. Over the course of the last term, we undertook a comprehensive bylaw review. However, due to obviously some of the resourcing requirements of the last term, several different emergencies arose, as I'm sure we're all aware. I'm wondering where we sit with that review now. If you feel that the review that you're undertaking right now is going to be achievable with the resources allotted in this budget.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I can start and Chief Chapman can fill in anything. Yes, we, as members will know, we are circulating the draft bylaw review work plan for this term of council at this moment, and we anticipate consulting with members of council in the months of February and March. Yes, for the work that we have set out for 2023, we believe that we have sufficient resources. Should new items be added on the work plan, it's certainly something we would flag to members of committee and council should there be an insufficiency of resources or should unforeseen expenses arise. For 2023, though, yes, we do anticipate we can meet what we have set out in the draft work plan.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Oh, sorry, I was just anticipating perhaps the chief wanted to weigh in there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, to GMI Yacht. I'm wondering, GMI Yacht, we heard a little bit about mental health during the delegation. I'm just wondering if you might want to take the opportunity to talk about some of the mental health initiatives that EPS is undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's a great question. I've actually like to pass that on to our paramedic chief and our fire chief as they would have the specifics. But when I was the fire chief, mental health was my top priority, and we established all kinds of assistance and resources. That to say, nothing is ever foolproof, and we're still seeing increases in WSIB. However, we continue to look at the best evidence and move forward on several of our programs. So if maybe I can start with Chief Hutt and then perhaps Chief Poirier.
Thank you for that question. And as GMA Audit has suggested, this is certainly top of on fire services. And I know for all our services, that's certainly top of mind. And
there is a lot of initiatives and there's always so much more to do, but I'm certainly proud of some of the initiatives that we're identifying, early intervention, and that's through our peer supports teams, WFI, which is wellness and fitness initiatives. But more importantly, there was a pilot project. It was called the Trauma Assist Program, and it was facilitated through the HR division, and where Ottawa Fire Service, Ottawa Paramedics, and it was long-term care participated in a pilot. And it really focused on, as I mentioned, that early intervention. So before somebody gets ill or sick, we're trying to recognize that at the very early stages to see where we can offer some assistance. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is people to be healthy and coming back to work. And that pilot project was very successful, and that's certainly something that we'd like to continue to move forward in the future.
Thank you, Chair, through the Chair. The mental health is an important file with the Ottawa Paramedic Service, and particularly with the paramedic community, not just here in Ottawa, but across the country. There's been work on a national level, and particularly with the Canadian Institute of Public Safety Research and Treatment. It was just received funding for another 2 years. So it's 7 years into its funding cycle. And what they've done is they brought researchers together to actually do research on public safety personnel, which includes fire, paramedic, police, corrections officers, and communications officers as well. And I'm the co-chair of the Public Safety Steering Committee, and there's been significant research done first to understand what is the problem. And there's several reports out on recognizing that not just firefighters and police officers, but paramedics are harmed every day. And we've been able to quantify how serious that is. We've also been able to quantify the risk of suicide amongst our community of public safety personnel. So those are kind of broad-based initiatives, and what they've started now is different treatment options that have, I would say, an evidence-informed or evidence-based support. So Trauma Assist Program is one program. Another program that's come to light is the Before Occupational Stress. That program is continuing as we speak. And of note, one of the larger programs that's hopeful that it gets funded by both the federal and the provincial governments here in Ontario as well. It's called Public Safety Personnel Net. It's a cognitive-based behavioral therapy program. It's internet-based. It provides the anonymity to those people who want to engage. And it actually has support in terms of evidence that it is something that is effective, that people actually enroll, and there is good results that are coming from that program. There's also longitudinal studies that are coming forward, particularly with police. They've been doing longitudinal studies to look at a control group and a group of police officers that are going through depot. We've been advocating that for both the fire community and for the paramedic community to do similar research so that we can see what actually is effective in terms of building, if we want to use the word resilience, amongst the community. Within the Ottawa Paramedic Service specifically, we have a fairly mature peer support program. I think we have close to 50 members. We also provide support with other members of the city staff. So we support Bylaw and other services. We may support fire as well. And it really is about us supporting the broader community. We still have several other initiatives where we're looking at providing greater support at the critical phases. We do have a psychologist that supports us through HR, but we're also looking at a trauma psychologist to support us in further in those acute phases. So there's a great amount of work that's taking place. By no means are we finished in terms of what we're doing. We're still learning. And we're still working with staff to find out better what their needs are and better what the treatments are. And it really is to provide a wraparound service, and that's still taking time. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to the issue.
I was muted. Thank you very much, Chief Poirier. I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak about that. Perhaps there's an opportunity over the course of this term with the anticipated expansion into emergency services of the Ottawa Veterans Task Force, where we can be sharing best practices and working together. I think that would, it seems like you're in a good phase to be making those sort of networking connections. So that's wonderful. Chief Poirier, just very briefly, before I cede the floor to my colleagues, I'm wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about how this budget helps to address the ongoing issue that we're seeing with level 0. I do realize that quite a bit of work has been done on the Ottawa Paramedic side over the course of the last term, and that we certainly are awaiting the results of the negotiation between the federal and provincial governments when it comes to healthcare funding. I know that the Ottawa Paramedic Service has really gone above and beyond over the course of the last term when it comes to addressing this issue. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about how this budget may contribute to further success in tackling this this very difficult issue.
Thank you, through the chair. First and foremost, the Ottawa Paramedic Service is very thankful for the support that we've received to date from this committee and from council with respect to an increase in staffing. Just to put that in the broadest strokes, the last term of council, there was 14 paramedics as a term of council for each year. This year again is 14. One of the broadest questions has been, why is it 14? When we look at our response numbers, it actually is in alignment with what was the incremental around 5% per year in terms of responses, and we're on that number. We don't have the exact numbers for 2022 as yet, but where we were in terms of our calculations, we were about another 5% increase when you lose 2019. So through COVID, our numbers went down. But we're significantly ahead this year. I think our actual number year over year is closer to 13-14%. But year over year, going back several years, the 5% rule and the 14 staff, which was the calculation for, I think, 2016, 2017, aligns well. So that's first and foremost. Specifically on the issue of level 0s, yes, it was an extremely difficult year. We had over 1,800 events of level 0s, over 74,000 minutes of level 0s. When you quantify that, that almost equals 7 weeks of time where there was not an ambulance available to transport an individual. Credit to the staff who persevered through all of this. It has been incredibly difficult time for them. What has been the number one driver of what triggers level 0? Absolutely has been the offload delays at the hospitals. Part of my belief is that we're part of the solution. We are part of the healthcare system and that we work together with the hospitals. So that's been our tact. The hospital has been supportive, and there have been several initiatives that have taken place to try to mitigate the problem within the healthcare system. Our taxpayers, our residents don't care. Where the service comes from in many respects is that they expect that level of service. So if it's us or if it's the hospital, they're still within our community. So the hospitals have been very supportive. So one of the issues, and recently we got an additional $1 million funding for the offload nurse program. That came December 23rd. Oh, and that added to the 1.5 that we already received. So that's $2.5 million towards dedicating a nurse to take the patient from the paramedic. And then on top of that, we've had several other initiatives that have been implemented this year. One at the Montfort, where there was a paramedic, and we have an agreement with the Montfort Hospital, where we assign a paramedic to that hospital. The Montfort pays the Ottawa Paramedic Service for that individual, and that paramedic takes up to 4 of our patients. So we're leaving 4 crews, which is 8 paramedics, 4 ambulances back on the road. Very successful. And that paramedic working in the hospital is actually able to perform all of the functions that a paramedic can perform. And that's unique. And it's been very innovative. And the hospital has been very pleased with that program. At the other 3 hospitals, what we've been doing is we've actually been assigning a paramedic to relieve our crews. So that's been the argument, is that if we have a paramedic there who can take up to 4, once again, they'll take to 4. These will be lower acuity patients. But those are usually the ones that end up in offload delay. Because if somebody's having a heart attack, somebody's having a stroke, usually there is no delay in them receiving care. But when somebody is a lower acuity, those are the ones that oftentimes wait. So we'll assign a paramedic to either the General, the Civic, and the Queensway. We've been doing that since December 31st, 2021, correct? So we've been continuing that program on a regular basis, and it has been very effective. Has it solved the problem? Not whatsoever. The hospitals are over capacity. The number of patients waiting for long-term care is through the roof. And I appreciate all those things, but we continue to work with the hospital, look for different ways that we can alleviate this problem to mitigate it. So we continue to work on that. The hospitals have been good partners in this. I know they can do more, and we'll continue to ask them to do more. The province has been supportive in terms of additional funding, but they can also support us more as well. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
We do see that there has been quite a bit of recruiting going on in order to bring our numbers up. Are you experiencing any difficulties in recruiting? So that is it difficult to meet the numbers that council's been requesting of the service and funding?
Through the chair, the problem in Ottawa is not a problem unique to our city. It has been across the province. And when you do a comparative analysis of offload delays across the 72 hospitals, I think that are documented, ours are in the bottom third, but we're not necessarily the worst. So around the GTA, Hamilton and Peel and Toronto suffer as we do. So just bringing that to light is that what's happened is that several of my peers in services around the province have also been hiring, recognizing that there's been not just the offload delay issue, there's been a significant increase in call volume for all of us, that there's actually a greater competition for recruits. We're still able to recruit. Last year, we recruited 52 individuals, through retirement, through different initiatives. An example is that we get one-time funding for our community paramedic program, so we will continue. That's been expanding, so we've been recruiting for that as well. Our numbers in terms of the actual individuals first applying is down, but they're down in Toronto, they're down in all the other communities as well. It is a competitive market now, but there still are enough staff available to recruit at this time, to the origin of your question, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Really do appreciate all the principals today and all the hard work that your teams do, keeping our city safe every day. Thanks for the leeway, Chair. As you can probably tell, I missed this file a little bit. I'll cede the floor.
Thank you, Councillor, for your questions. Colleagues, the order of speakers keeps changing on my screen, so I've written them down. I have next Councillors Hill, Plante, Desroches, Johnson, and Kelly. So that's the order I'm sticking to. Councillor Hill, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. That works for me. And I want to follow up on my colleague, Councillor Luloff's comments of appreciation. Certainly to hear, the events that are going on this morning and yesterday out in Barrhaven as well. That's the coal face, and that's what we need to enable with this oversight board. I was very appreciative to hear the innovative solutions to the level 0 issues, because certainly that was something that I wanted to hear on, and you've answered that well. So thank you very much. I appreciate the best that we can do to make some lemonade with the lemons that we have, and certainly we need to make sure that where we can reduce risk and manage risk, we're going to do that. And so, Chair, I think my question is for Chief Hutt, but we heard a compelling delegation this morning, and so my question to you is one of risk management in our structure. Knowing that we will never have enough people to do all the things that we want to do. Right now, do you feel with what we're enabling you with in the 23 budget, do you have the tools that you need from a structure perspective and able to manage the risks that you foresee we're going to be dealing with from an emergency preparedness and management perspective in order to adequately meet the needs of the city?
Thank you for your question, Chair, through you. As a chief, we have to look at our operational requirements day in and day out, and it's one of those items that you constantly evaluate and see where we're at. And the Ottawa Fire Service actually goes through an extremely in-depth accreditation process through the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, and we're probably one of maybe a handful or less than a dozen in Canada that actually has that international accreditation. And
what the accreditation looks at, and there's a whole magnitude of this reaccreditation, and it looks everything from effective response force. How many people do we have on scene at certain times for critical tasking? And I have to tell you, our office without a day, we're constantly looking at that information. We're looking at things like intensification, growth in our community. We're looking at our transportation network. How is our road system, increasing and what that looks like. So that's always certainly on our mind, and we're always evaluating that data. I have to say, when you look at the Ottawa Fire Service budget right now, it's 90% of that is wages and compensation. So we have an extremely lean budget. And I say that, and I'm sorry if this might be a reoccurring theme, but the pandemic, like everybody else, was extremely hard on the Ottawa Fire Service. And I see ourselves really in a recovery phase right now, where let's dust the dust off right now and brush it off and see where we're at. Because I think when we start to look at our stats and our data and the call volumes, it was very, very skewed as a result of that pandemic that we faced over 3 years. So I guess to get to your point is that it's always on our forefront to look at that information. Do we have enough staffing? Can we respond? And are we meeting our response criteria? I really see this term or this year for us to sit back, look at that data, have a real and make some decisions based on evidence-based. I don't know what the new normal is, but I certainly feel we're a little more stable now than what we were in 3 years. So what I would suggest or ask is that for our service to conduct those reviews, look at that data, that information, and if there's opportunities, and certainly my colleague from the association, Dave Andre, today does raise some items. We are seeing an increase in WSIB, and some of those items are as a result of legislation changes, and probably for the good, because it's really helping identifying those members at early stages to get the help that they need. So, but it comes to, there's some negative impact to that as well. Some recent changes to the legislation as well. And again, I think it's extremely positive, but maternity and parental leave, where, they've increased time off for people, and that's wonderful. If you look 25 years ago, people weren't using those opportunities, and we're seeing that now. In the summer alone, we had, there was close to 45 people off for 18 months. And so it's those aspects that we have to put into our staffing factor moving forward. So I think as a reset, I really would like that opportunity to evaluate some of that data this year. And if there's opportunities where I need to bring items back to committee, I certainly will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. That's a very measured and balanced approach, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Plante and then Councillor Desroches.
Oui, merci beaucoup. I guess I'll just sort of repeat my question that I had posed earlier. As a lot of you are aware, Bylaw, ambulance, fire, we have something in my ward called the Panda Game, which stretches all of our resources very heavily, even leading up to the game. The flyering, the communication, etc. So I guess my question for staff is there a way to sort of budget line how much this is costing our emergency services, this one particular game on this one weekend? The reason I pose that question is because I am meeting with the presidents of Carleton, U Ottawa very shortly, and I would just sort of like to give them a bit of an idea of what this is, sort of the pressure this is putting on our emergency services, who do a fantastic job, by the way, but it shouldn't be this difficult.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to answer that. Merci, Conseillère Plante. Yeah, for Panda, what it's cost EPS last year was $57,000. We do have separate budget line items that we create for special events. So we're tracking our costs associated with that. I can also tell you that the police number is much higher than that, as Panda became more of a police response after the fact. That being said, we continue to work through our Event Central people as well with the organizers to see if there's a way to recover those costs.
Is it possible that you can just in an email or some sort of spreadsheet break that down for me, so then I can just bring it to the meeting? And I will also be asking the same thing of OPS, by the way.
Yeah, certainly we can work through our business support service and our event central to provide you with that information so that you're well prepared for your meeting. Thank you.
Merci énormément.
Bienvenue.
Anything else, Councillor? Or was that it on Panda? I think that was it. Okay, excellent. Councillor DeLaRoche and then Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. I have three questions. First, for the fire chief, and I talked to you briefly about the Leitrim station that is in the Finley Creek area. And I looked at the budget and I didn't see any investments in it. And I'm okay with that in the sense that it's a very old station that thankfully was developed under the leadership of the city of Gloucester prior to amalgamation. Since that time, we've of course had tremendous growth in that southeast part of the city. Like it or not, we've had lands just added to the urban boundary on the south side of the southeast side of Bank Street. And we're fortunate to have a lot of really older assets in this area. For example, the police station will be surplused to once the South Station is built in South Nepean. And I look at that entire precinct of aging assets, and in particular the fire station, and I ask you, is this the best place for the fire station? Do we have a plan overall to look at serving the growth in the southeast quadrant? And this is, again, small station. I know they work very, very hard. I want to thank them on record today. They're doing a fundraiser in conjunction with St. Patrick's Day to help the Rotary Home in South Ottawa. So I thank them for that, and the community thanks them for that. But just wondering, and maybe it's going to come in a future budget, what is the plan for that area in terms of serving the growth that we're seeing? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chair, through you. Leitrim Station, Station 32, I believe that's the station we're referring to. And what I'd like to say is it really goes back to we constantly, again, evaluate as part of our accreditation. But one item we're going to look at as part of our accreditation process is a station location study. Our last one was done in 2015, and that's why we're building Canada North right now, because of that study. So there is an opportunity when we do that study, when we look at the intensification, where the future growth is going to look like. From a staffing perspective, from a resourcing perspective, that every station is analyzed at that time. I do have to say, with the amount of intensification that is occurring in that area, suggesting right now it's a pump station where there's 4 personnel on duty, and I'm always proud of all our service members, and they work hard each and every day. I actually see growth in that area because of some of the matrix that we're looking at right now, because of the population, because of the road network, and so I certainly see some growth coming in that area, and that'll be interesting when we look at the station location study, what that says.
Okay, good to hear. I always think it's the loneliest fire station in the city, but I don't think it is, because of the growth and because we have an industrial areas there that are also growing, and I think they are very active with responding to them. So I appreciate that. So is that in this budget that you'd be doing this study, or is that a future budget?
So this year we've committed to complete a station location study. That's one segment of our reaccreditation that is coming up in 2024. So we'll have to have that study completed for us to move ahead with the rest of the matrix for our accreditation. So.
Okay, thanks for that. And as I mentioned to you, I think our assets in that area are underserving, not just the fire station. The fire station is serving it well. I hear your answer today, but all of our assets there, whether it be recreation, our winter maintenance, I don't think are really adequately sort of structured at this point in time. So I see that station as part of a global plan there to really get our assets lined up to support the growth in that area. So I look forward to that. Thank you for the answer. Second theme of questions is just on the bylaw review that's going to be undertaken this year. And I guess I just want to understand it a bit better in terms of what the focus will be. I think we saw a lot of pressure on our bylaw services, particularly with the winter storms that we've had back to back to back, and people kind of scratch their head like, hey, I got a ticket. The plow's already been by, and I get it that still the ban is in effect, but I don't see tickets on the street that haven't been plowed. And so I guess I'm kind of hoping from this exercise we'll get some idea that we can communicate to the public in terms of how we respond to priorities for bylaw services.
Mr. Chair, I believe this is more of an operational question, so I would forward it to Director Chapman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Specifically on the during a parking ban, we do some communication through social media to encourage people to remain off the street during the parking ban for various reasons. Yes, the plow may have gone by, but the plow may need to come back to salt, to sand the street. There may have been, cars on the street when they went by the first time and need to go by and do a second pass. So we encourage residents to ensure that they remain off the street during the entire ban. So, that officers are, deployed into different areas of the city. When there's an entire city ban on, parking ban for the entire city, we could have as many as 40 officers out there. So they may do several passes on each street in their area during the ban, depending on how long the ban's on for.
Okay, thanks for the answer. I wasn't looking for a fulsome answer, but I appreciate that. I was more in terms of like this study that you're undertaking, like what, is it a prioritization exercise? Is it going to demonstrate how we're deploying our resources across the city? I guess I just need some more information in terms of what the focus of this study will be.
So I think sorry. Go ahead, Valerie.
I can speak to the bylaw review work plan. That is specifically a 4-year plan that we are developing to determine which bylaws will get reviewed or developed this term of council. We anticipate meeting with members of council throughout February and March, finalizing the draft work plan, and then bringing it forward to this committee and council midterm, likely June.
Thank you. That's helpful. And just lastly, to Kim, we've had the audit report on the protests. We're anticipating another report from the federal government in terms of a much broader response. The Auditor General said that there's some incompleteness to the audit. I see this committee playing a big role, I think, over the course of the next 4 years in terms of better preparing the nation's capital for either events like that or protests or storms or what have you. And just wondering if in this budget you have the resources that you need to start preparing for the responses that we need to demonstrate that are going to be coming from the Auditor General's report. And again, this study that's going to come forward. And again, I see this committee playing a big role in that.
Thank you, Chair. That's a great question. I can tell you that this budget, I see it more as a transitional budget because of the tight timeframes and the fact that we're going from the previous council to the new council. So we're trying to make it very tight and try to make it accommodating, if you will, for everyone and still manageable. What our plan is for 2014, and you'll see throughout the year, we'll have various annual reports. And in those reports, we will be showing what our growth needs are and what the situation is. And it includes public safety service, it includes fire paramedics, everyone. So everyone's going to do an analysis of their needs for this term of council so that we can start presenting those and painting the picture with regards to what's needed to move forward to make sure that we have what we need to continue to respond to these types of incidents.
Okay, thanks for the answer. We're certainly putting a lot of effort and focus on the LRT response, as we should. But we need to put that equal measure of effort in the follow-up to these inquiries that are coming. And again, having the city ready to respond and making investments and having better coordination amongst the emergency services or the utilities. And look forward to hearing more about that as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, I have Councillor Johnson, followed by Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. So I have a few different questions. I guess I'll start with Beth, please. Hi, Beth. Nice to see you again. I wanted to follow up on some of our comments that we exchanged during the emergency management orientation, where we were talking about the opportunities for community involvement in emergency responses. We had discussed the power of investing in neighborhood supports so that it's not exclusively within the the city's purview. And you cited, I think Hurricane Katrina, that Hurricane Katrina had done a review and shown that if they actually had allowed neighbors to help neighbors, that there may have been less lives lost. So I do find this a very interesting opportunity. Is there any investment in the current budget for supporting these community investments as it stands?
So indirectly through our regular programming, because as part of our regular programming, we do community engagement. And this year we have a new tool called the Community Emergency Management Toolkit that is meant to help communities prepare better for emergencies. And we're volunteering to meet with community associations, faith-based groups, BIAs, and other interested entities to walk them through it and help them develop their own emergency plans. We actually have recently had some outreach from Councillor Curry, and she's identified 8 different entities in her ward that would like a session. So we're organizing a sort of big session for that ward, and we're happy to do the same for others. I think it's a nice opportunity to not only have us engage with communities directly, but also for community associations to meet each other and potentially learn from each other. And so as part of our regular programming, we are trying to do more and more community engagement.
I'm very glad to hear that, and I'm happy we were able to raise this opportunity at committee. I think it could be of interest to many of our colleagues to be able to take you up on that offer. There are other ways that we currently support community associations through Parks and Rec. So I am interested in exploring over the next year what kinds of alignments we could create with the different ways that we support community associations, and maybe find some efficiencies there that could support those groups and strengthen their recruitment processes, right? I'm thinking of the derecho where there was a neighbor who firefighters were the only ones that were available to her, and they were changing out the batteries of her life assisting devices. And the trauma of these big storms is enormous, and she was incredibly isolated. So we're really lucky to have the city supports that we do, but we can offer more with less, I think, by investing in these communities. So thank you for that answer, Beth. That's tremendous. And then I also wanted to pick up on some of Councillor DeRoche's questions about growing neighborhoods. So I think perhaps you could just help me understand how the transition between volunteer firefighters transitioning into professional firefighters, as a community grows, you make some calculations maybe. I don't know enough about this, so I'm hoping you can speak to that so that we can predict maybe some of these. It's not only just assets that Councillor DeRoche is speaking of, but also personnel. Would we be absorbing more costs that we used to get on a voluntary basis, please?
Thank you for that question, Chair, through yourself. City of Ottawa is the largest composite fire service in Canada. And so when we say that, we have, and I'm rough averaging the numbers, but there's 1,000 full-time or career members. And then there's also 500 volunteers. So, which is very dynamic and unique. Where 80% of our area is rural. So, we count very highly on our composite or our volunteer stations. And when I say composite, it's a combination of career members with volunteers working cohesively together. And then we have areas that are just solely rural. And then we have our more urban suburb core, which is our career staff. So absolutely. And these are all the trigger points that we look at when we do our accreditation. And again, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but when we look at population growth in densities or in communities, when we look at road speed, road connections, road work, when we look at building stock, what is in that area? Is it just residential, or is there some industrial and commercial? So those are all factors that we have to look at the matrix. And at a point, you're right, there is a tipping point where you're either in a composite area, and you know what, we've hit that threshold where we should be looking at a more of an urban response where that would have career people in those areas. And really what that offers is that the first due or the first apparatus on scene will tends and quite often will be there quite quicker because we have people in the station available. On a composite station or a volunteer station, most members are either at their place of work or at home. Once they receive the page, they respond to the station and they assemble. So there's a little bit of a time lapse where they're having to assemble at the station. So it's crucial when we look at all the matrix, we look at that data. At some point, you'll be switching from an urban area, or sorry, a rural area. But we'll be switching from intensification purposes to an urban response area. And that is all part of our station location study, effective response force, meaning we have to have so many personnel on scene to do critical tasking. And then we also have to look at our neighborhoods, as we've mentioned. We also break it down into high risk residential, vulnerable occupancies versus single residential. So there's a lot of items we look at when we're making those decisions. But so that's always on our radar. And every year we have to send an annual report to our accreditors, they're a third party. They're not associated with Ottawa Fire. They review our data, our information, and they're making recommendations based on the matrix. And so that's all. And we will be redoing that, as I said, or as our accreditation will be coming up for renewal in 2024.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my final question is for Roger Chapman with respect to bylaw. I wonder if you could comment generally on how your staff is able to be proactive in their approach for enforcing bylaw versus reactive, and what the implications for the current budget is on that. I think we often hear from residents who feel like the current bylaws are not being enforced. So the idea of creating new rules or new expectations, like for example, the vacant unit tax, for which you have 2 new staff persons to enforce. It feels like, I know it's cost recovery, but I wonder with the existing demands on your team, whether it's reasonable to expect that you are able to enforce proactively, or is it really always complaints based? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'll start by saying that, proactive enforcement is certainly an entirely different model of what Bylaw and Regulatory Services has had over the years with where we react to complaints. We haven't done a cost analysis recently on what it would cost to do proactive enforcement. I can say that we did one, I think it was back in early 2000s, but it is a significant increase in resources that would be required to do proactive enforcement. Recently, we've taken the model that, where we have new bylaws coming into effect, and we see that proactive enforcement can actually help, with, trying to cope with some of the calls that are coming in. And it's not always reflected in SR and service request data. But those new bylaws, such as the tow truck bylaw, the short-term rental bylaw, the rental management bylaw, those bylaws, council in the last term provided us with FTEs to be able to support those bylaws and to be able to do some proactive enforcement. So recent years have seen a bit of a hybrid model for us, where we are doing a lot more proactive enforcement, but those, in certain activities or certain programs that we do enforcement for, but, we're resourced appropriately when we're doing those. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, just to recap who I have on my list, Councillor Kelly is next, then King, Devine, Dudas, and Kavanaugh. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for that segue. I guess our brains are very much in a similar place this morning, and I did want to touch on volunteer, especially when it comes to the fire service. So I'll start with Chief Hutt, and I can't speak for other wards, but as you alluded to in your previous comments, the volunteers in the rural area are a really important part of being able to respond to the calls out here. And so I've heard a lot of talk this morning about staffing and numbers and ability to respond. So are you calculating the service's ability to respond with those volunteers as part of that formula, or how is that determined each budget cycle? Like how many people might be needed in different areas of the city?
Thank you for your question, Chair, through you. Yeah, so as I've mentioned, in a composite fire service, we're always evaluating. You have rural areas, you have suburb areas with rural and career that interface, and then you have career stations as well. So we are constantly looking at that information, that data. At some point, and all the matrix are different based on where we're working within the city, but it would reason to say that you go from a rural application or a rural response, rural settings, rural data to a composite, to transition into a composite where you're introducing career members, urban members into the volunteer, and then at some point there's a threshold where you meet that composite station meets an urban response criteria, and then you transition from a composite fire station or an area to an urban. So yeah, so we're constantly looking at that, and I do have to say, regardless of what division in the Ottawa Fire Service, we heavily rely on our volunteer fire service. They do offer tremendous work and pride and ownership within our communities, and we recognize that. And I also recognize the hard work of our urban full-time colleagues. And you know what? There's an opportunity for us to look at the right matrix, provide the right response for our residents, and that's what we look at when we accredit.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm learning a lot today, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity. So my ears perked up when I heard, and I know this is standard right across the city for the most part, that the good chunk of the budget goes towards salary and benefits. And so I was wondering if there's been an analysis done on sort of a return on investment on volunteers versus full-time, and whether or not there might be an opportunity to invest more in volunteers in some of the urban areas to supplement the efforts of the full-time firefighters, and whether or not that might be a way to increase the number of calls you could get to while limiting the expense to the city.
Once again, thank you for your question, Chair. There's a couple elements that we have to look at. We always have to respect, I guess first and foremost is when we look at the information and the data, the first do is how soon can we get an apparatus or a crew on scene in the quickest amount of time? And that's what we have to look at. So when we look at the volunteer aspect, we also have to be collective too of there's collective agreement items that we have to be aware of, and then we have to work within those parameters. And just for the committee's information today, we work closely with the volunteer group. We have a rural fire advisory committee, so very similar to the association representing the career full-time members. There is a group that we work regularly with, and it's a rural fire advisory committee, and that's an opportunity for that team to raise questions, concerns with fire leadership, and that's been extremely effective with that group.
One more question for you, and then I got one for Mr. Poirier as well. I'm just wondering what's the health of that volunteer program like right now? Are the numbers going up? Are they going down? Are they staying steady? How is it going in terms of attracting and keeping volunteers on board?
So that's a very good question. So each rural station has 25 members assigned to the station. When we look at that, we use, and this is just a rough calculation, we use 3 to 1. So for every 3 firefighters, one is available to respond at a minimum, and we look at that. We also have technology where if volunteer firefighters are responding to the station, there's applications where they click to say they're responding. It gets displayed at the station, so you know how many firefighters are responding. But I have to say, I know across the province there is a trend. There's a difference, and there's trends that some services are having difficulty to attract volunteer firefighters. What I can say, we seem to be very fortunate in the city of Ottawa. We're able to maintain our complement of 25 firefighters at our station. I think some of the nuances that we are seeing for full transparency is members that used to stay on for 25, 30 years of service, we're seeing less of that, and you're seeing more 5 to 10 years from a retention perspective, and I think that's not unique just to Ottawa Fire Service. That's right across Canada that we're overseeing those. And so our goal is to foster those relationships and maintain that healthy and effective response force in our rural settings.
Thank you, Chief Hutt. And to Mr. Poirier, just given what we're hearing about the success and the importance of that volunteer program, particularly in the rural areas for fire, has there been any consideration from a paramedic standpoint on establishing a similar program to alleviate the pressures on our paramedics in the city of Ottawa?
Through the chair, in 2001, when they amalgamated the 6 paramedic services into a single service, there was a decision made from an operational point of view to have a full-time service. And over the next 3-5 years, the remaining part-time members either became full-time or moved on to other employment. So the model was to have a full-time model, and it's been particularly good for the city from an operational point of view because of the requirement and the legislative prescription. So paramedics require at least 2 years of college, and that'll soon be going to 3 years. So to have the ability to have part-time individuals from that point of view has been very difficult in terms of maintaining the competency and maintaining their licensure. So that's been the decision that was made a long time ago. We've looked at it over the last several years to, as part of a renewal process, and we haven't been able to find the cost benefit where it would be something that we would proceed with at the time. So we continue on with the full-time model, which one of the adjustments we've made to provide an improved service to the rural communities in the city is that several years ago, and it's probably been at least 10 years, that we started the Paramedic Response Unit Program, which is a single paramedic in an SUV responding. And that has been able to provide an enhanced service, particularly on the periphery outside the Greenbelt, recognizing that we can actually double the service by having 2 single paramedics in those vehicles. So that's kind of one of the initiatives that we've done. A second one that's unique to West Carleton is that we've got funding from the province for the paramedic to be assigned to the West Carleton Family Health Team in CARP. So that's been another initiative that's locally based in a rural community. But coming back to the specific request for part-time, that is something that's not on the table at this time unless I receive direction otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor King, just before I go to you, I just want to acknowledge Councillor Hubley and Leeper who have joined us. We're on item 5, which is the budget. Colleagues are posing questions. We approved item 4, terms of reference on consent. And after the budget, we'll deal with Councillor Devine's motion. Councillor King, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Brockington, and congratulations on your appointment. Just had a few questions to staff concerning emergency preparedness, especially around funding for storms and emergencies. We know reviewing the budget document that and just living it, if you were serving on the previous term of council, the challenges around the May long weekend storm, and you've outlined a tremendous amount of spending that has occurred, the $395,000 reference to the derecho, $9 million on community support centers and wellness visits set up in the immediate aftermath of the storm, $4.25 million to repair city infrastructure, $30 million to repair and restore the heavily damaged Hydro Ottawa network, though we would appreciate that does come from ratepayers and other sources of revenue. And obviously the nearly $400,000 spent on the occupation. I'm just wondering, is staff, based on the increasing amounts of catastrophic events and natural disasters that are occurring, whether staff is thinking of other funding models and whether there should be a reserve set aside for such challenges? So that's my first question of staff.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer that, and then perhaps Beth Gooding could add anything that I may not address.
At this point in time, the emergency management response to city emergencies is an all of city response model, meaning that every department, participates in the response, and therefore the funding kind of gets allocated based on their involvement. That being said, we cost code every new emergency, so we can track all of the expenses and we can see where they go. I can pass it perhaps to Cyril Rogers, who can comment on a different funding model. At this point in time, that's how we manage it.
Thank you, Kim, through the chair. So Kim's did a great job explaining that. So basically, whenever there's a new emergency event, we do, activate our finance team because we're part of the all city response, and we do track those costs. So we reported in Q2, our Q2 forecasts, I think the number was around $20 million in terms of the direct impact across all city services. We also had funding impacts there as well for the convoy that we experienced in the city. At the time, there was, some sort of commitment or communication. I wouldn't say commitment, maybe communication that the province was going to fund the impact of Dureco. We haven't seen that confirmed commitment at this stage. What we will be doing is in April, I will be reporting back through committee and council with the 2022 year-end disposition, which will highlight how we've been able to address that impact across the city. We do have the tax stabilization reserve, which is the first reserve that we would go to from those kind of unforeseen operating type impacts. What I can also say is through the Q2 forecast report as well, we've been pretty diligent in terms of implementing spending freezes, if you will. Looked at our different models in terms of trying to make sure that we can kind of make up some of that cost. So full analysis will be coming in the next 6 to 8 weeks or so when we come back with that report. The challenge is, the city has seen significant unforeseen events year over year, to the point where, when is an unforeseen event now normalized? But the nature of unforeseen events is there is normalization. So if you follow the track, right? So that's a challenge we have. So, the good thing is we do have that tax stabilization reserve as our backstop, and we do report back quarterly. So we kind of, have our little bit of levers to kind of manage the risks as we go through that process. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I appreciate the answer. Obviously, we need to track the expenses, and obviously we want the province to step up and take responsibilities when there are emergencies. But obviously we also need the flexibility to adjust internally to some of the challenges that we're facing. So I do appreciate the answer to that question, and I will look forward to the continuous reports that will come to committee about tracking these types of expenses. My next question focuses on bylaw enforcement, and I guess it builds upon some of the discussion that some of my colleagues have raised previously, both Councillor Kelly and Councillor Johnson, I believe. And I just wanted to ask questions on whether staff believes that there are enough FTEs for the high level of calls that we receive around bylaw enforcement inquiries.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question. For 2023, we're really looking at this being, just to reassess the, where we're at with our FTE, versus service requests coming out of the pandemic. What was the impact of the pandemic versus what is regular operations? I can say that, previous council has been very supportive in providing bylaw and regulatory services with appropriate resources, including the 7 growth positions that we received last year. Our service request data has been very, very consistent for the last 4 years in around that, averaging around 95,000 service requests a year. And we've seen that increase in FTEs, which we feel that we've now, that balance is acceptable. And we feel that, we really need to do that further analysis this year coming out of the pandemic to see what, what is with regular operations and see where our service request data, what our new normal will be for, for meeting those expectations. So. But right now we feel that we are at sufficient FTEs for the service requests that we're receiving.
I appreciate that. I was wondering if you could provide just a little bit more granularity. I was just wondering what the level of calls per FTE were during the height of the pandemic, and do we anticipate that the number of calls could go down as people continue to return to the workplace?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yeah, calls per FTE right now. I mean, we're doing the analysis right now for preparing for our annual report that's coming up, in which we will be bringing forward to this committee in May this year. But right now it's looking, prior to the pandemic, we were, it wasn't uncommon for an officer to be handling about 1,200 calls a year, which was, in our opinion, was significantly higher than what comparators across the province. We were trying to get into that range of the 650 to 800 per officer. We felt that was what is manageable for an officer to handle. And right now, preliminary data analysis that we're doing, we're seeing that our officers are in that threshold. So we're right around the 800 calls per officer. So we're finally getting to what we set as our standard pre-pandemic.
Well, that's excellent to know, and I appreciate all the hard work that you undertake there, because I know we relay many of the bylaw requests, obviously, to your office, and we know it can be challenging. I just have one last question of staff, Chair, and that concerns paramedic offloading. I had the opportunity just on the edge of the new term to go to the MOF4 to hear an announcement about the launch of that program with then Chair Luoff. And I think it's an excellent model. And we understand that the pilot will be complete in September of this year. But I was just wondering, do we have an idea of how that currently, in terms of the way that it's structured, will impact level 0 and addressing the pressures on the paramedic service?
Through the chair, the program at the MOF4 to date has been successful. We don't have the data to support, I think, specifically your inquiry. It, on the face value, every time that an individual there, a paramedic, takes 4 patients, we get 4 crews that are back on the road. So part of our homework will be to quantify that on a yearly basis. We have extended the program to September next year, so we'll have 1 year's data at that point. We can report back sooner than that on the actual, like on a 6-month basis. We're also at the point of having created the contract with the Ottawa Hospital to do the same. And the unique feature there, I spoke earlier, is that the paramedic there will be able to do full scope of their competencies and make use of their knowledge, skills, and abilities to their fullest extent. Whereas currently, right now, those paramedics that are at the other 3 hospitals are just holding that patient. So we continue to monitor that. The actual effect on level 0 has been difficult to quantify for us. I can report that at this time, the last 7 weeks or so have been better, probably by about at least 1/3 of a decrease in terms of the number of incidents of level 0 and the time at level 0. But we'll be able to report more fully as part of our reporting process later this spring. Thank you.
I appreciate that answer. Obviously, we want to see a tremendous amount of success from this pilot so that we could really enhance the amount of paramedic response and reduce the services or the resources that are tied up when somebody reaches the hospital. So really thank you for all the work. And I thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to ask the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I have Councillor Devine next, followed by Councillor Dudas.
Thank you, Chair. And to Mr. Ayat and to your team, allow me to just say it's quite a privilege to have to have oversight over such a caring and dedicated group of individuals whose daily life is nothing less than just protecting the well-being of our city. So thank you very much for what you do. My questions are for Bylaw and for public safety, but just to offer some thanks and acknowledgements to Ottawa Fire Service and to paramedics. We all get the daily, Chief Hutt, we all get the daily emails in our box about the various incidents that you report to. And it's quite inspiring to get these detailed reports that say that you received a call at such a minute and 7 minutes later you're on the scene and 8 minutes later person is pulled from a car or whatever. It's really inspiring to see the professionalism and the quick way in which your team responds. And to Chief Poirier, I so appreciate the stalwart and stoic response you're taking on level 0, realizing that you have quite a hurdle that you have to overcome. What I won't ever forget the story I saw on, I think it was on CBC, was about level 0, and there was a young paramedic who is one of yours who was saying that it's the best job he could ever imagine having, and if it were to continue in that way, he would have to quit. And that certainly resonated with me. The questions I have teeny tiny questions for Bylaw on licensing fees. As I went over the licensing fees aspect on the revenue side of Bylaw, I couldn't help but notice, but with most of the licensing fees, there's a 2% increase from year to year, likely in line with budget direction. But two elements stood out, and this might be small potatoes, but on the issue of towing, there was 0 increase from year to year for licensing fees. I wasn't sure if that had to do with the fact that in some cases towing are an essential service, or if they're just persuasive in other ways. But can you let me know why there's 0 increases for licensing fees for towing?
So through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Councillor, for the question. The answer to that question is basically that it's a brand new bylaw. So it's keeping in mind that licensing fees are for cost recovery for administration, inspection, and enforcement. And we're just doing the analysis over the year to make that determination if those licensing fees are set at the right rate. So we won't be able to report back on that until after 1 year of data is collected.
Thank you. And the other question still in licensing was, again, respecting the fact that most of the projections were of a 2% increase. There was a 10% increase 2 years in a row on the fees for, I believe, spaying and neutering. And I was just wondering why such a high fee for making the dogs and cats' lives so miserable.
So through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the question, Councillor. Spay and neuter clinic fees are considered a little bit different than those user fees, although they are part of the user fee schedule. They are voluntary fees. So people, volunteer to use our services at the spay and neuter clinic. And again, those fees are, the analysis is done on a yearly basis, and it's really truly to reflect the actual cost of providing those services. So as we've seen in many other environments around the world, the cost of medications and veterinarian practices has increased substantially through the pandemic, and those costs are truly to reflect that increase in cost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. My next question, I believe, would be for public safety. So I believe this would be for you, Beth Gooding, and I'm just following up on the questions and the subject that Councillor Johnson raised earlier with regards to investment in emergency preparedness. So, we all know that Ottawa has had several natural disasters over the past few years. I believe I heard you mention that there's no new investment in community response. There is certainly going to be education and outreach for it. I can speak from practical experience. I was the president of a community association when our neighborhood got hit by a tornado, and we were that much more effective in 2022 after the derecho because of what we had learned. But all of what we had learned was self-taught. And my point is, having now been a councillor for a few months, I can see just how differently managed the various community associations are. Some have great resources and governance, and some are just, floating by the skin of their teeth. I just made up that expression, that doesn't exist. And I suppose my question is, if And I do believe that the city will benefit from relying on the resources, knowledge, and skill sets of communities on the ground. But if there's no real investment in mobilizing, organizing, and training them, if we're just relying on them to show up to seminars and take a binder that some of them may use and some of them may not, it feels like it won't provide the return on what I hope would be a greater investment. I can assume that not much will happen for 2023. But so just as an example, I'm really close to securing a $10,000 contribution from a utility to buy generators for every community association in Ward 9. So they'll be providing the tools, but the communities themselves don't always have the assets, the know-how, the training. So if not for 2023, might there be some greater investments on organizing, mobilizing, training volunteers so that they can be your grassroots first responders? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take that question, and certainly, and Beth could add if we need any more information. But certainly, yes. So 2023 is our transition year, and as you'll see through our annual report for public safety and throughout the year, we'll be preparing a plan for moving through this term of council and what that would look like. So stay tuned. You will get it this year, and that is part of the go forward plan.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. We have next Councillor Dudas and then Kavanaugh. Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I just wanted to start by thanking the firefighters, the paramedics, and the police that are currently on scene at the explosion here in the East End. You know, once again, they're out there doing such a phenomenal job as they always do, and I know that it's quite traumatic for those living in that area. So I just wanted to express my extreme gratitude for their response. My question, so as the nation's capital, our first responders, our city services, we're used to responding to situations that overlap jurisdictions. The main example, one that's really in the forefront, is demonstrations, but there's also things that fall into the realm of, say, terrorism threats, you know, big examples of inter-jurisdictional requirements. Recently, the city's Auditor General released a report on the city's response to the convoy protest and identified the need for greater coordination, collaboration, and communication by city services with Ottawa Police, but also with federal and provincial enforcement agencies and services. We know that jurisdictional boundaries, both physical and legislative, are currently being reviewed because of the result of the protest, either by ourselves as a municipality, but also on the federal level. So I wanted to ask, can you confirm if in this budget or if in following budgets, we will expect to see financial pressures as a result of these changes, where there'll be an opportunities to offload some of the services that we currently provide or areas that we currently cover to other levels of government? And what can we as committee members expect to receive as informational updates on how the city will be implementing the AG's findings?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer that. First and foremost, I've seen the recommendations. However, I really can't speak to individual recommendations until Friday, when Audit Committee will be presenting their findings, at which time I'll be there to answer any questions that may come up. That being said, we're always in a state of continuous improvement. We're always trying to improve everything we do and to engage with our partners. I think you've seen a lot of that since the convoy, where we've had other major events that have taken place and our response has been different and better. And, so from that perspective, I think that, we are always looking at opportunities, one, for funding from various levels of government, two is for improved communications, and three is for improved joint response. And, you indicated a terrorist incident. We do have a CBRN team here, which is a terrorist response team here in Ottawa, and fire and paramedics are part of that team with police, and they practice and train regularly. So as an example of multi-jurisdictional response, we have those capabilities. They're just not at the forefront. They're behind the scenes. You may not see them. We also have specialty teams for all kinds of different events that are established. Now, if we're looking at actually getting rid of some of our areas of responsibility, if you will, or jurisdiction to other areas, no one wants to have responsibilities downloaded on them or uploaded to various levels of government. But certainly, we're always looking at different ways of doing business to improve it for our citizens. And that is our main focus, is what can we do different to help our citizens? And that includes communications, and that includes getting them advance notice. And I know it's always a challenge based on the fact that we do have different jurisdictions and different levels of responsibility. However, we have to overcome those challenges to make sure that our information, or our citizens, get the information they need, and that we're providing them with the response that they need. I don't know if I answered all your questions. I think you had a series of them there.
Yeah, well, maybe, no, and I appreciate that. You did. I think that it's not even uploading or downloading. I think the word more better used here is integration. What we have seen is that the city is very prepared. We do have these specialty units. We have quite a long history of being the nation's capital, being prepared for various things, whether it's natural disasters, but I'm specifically speaking about these kind of national disruptions, so to speak, things we inherit because of our stature as a national capital. What I'm wondering though is, do we see any of this in this budget document? Can we expect that there will be ripple effects, whether positive or negative, from offloading some of these costs or better integration of services in future budgets that will put pressure that we as committee members will then have to take into account as we're making decisions for the betterment of not just the city of Ottawa, but also because we have that, the benefits and the negatives of being the capital of Canada.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's another great question. And again, this budget is a transitionary budget for us. They're very tight time frames, and I can assure you that we've changed some of our programming to address some of the concerns. So while we're not asking for new money to deal with it, we certainly are changing how we're doing business to address some of those concerns. That being said, as we move forward for this next term of council, and as we bring forward annual reports and other reports forward, you will see more asks with regards to how we can do things better, which may require a budget allocation for it.
Okay. And I appreciate that. I look forward to seeing what those asks are so we can debate them thoroughly. The other part of the question that I had too was not just about the AG's findings and just information, but I'm going to give the example of some of my colleagues previously who weren't here the last term and had wonderful questions about community associations members and their involvement and on the ground involvement, grassroots, and how we can mobilize that. One of the motions, like direction motion, it eludes me at the moment, that was put forward in response to the May storm was that community associations would be integrated into the city's involvement and response. So I want to make sure that whether we're learning lessons from the convoy, from massive natural disasters, whatever it be, hopefully never terrorism threats, but you know what, we need to be prepared. I want to make sure that we as a committee and we as a council and we as residents of the city of Ottawa are aware of what findings, what best practices we have learned from and are being updated. So my question is, and I got a long-winded way of getting around to it, was how can we as committee members expect to receive informational updates? I'm sure the chair will be very involved in determining the timing and the information received. But how can we know that we've learned from these situations and that we are mobilizing in the best ways, we're leveraging every opportunity, and that we're budgeting accordingly?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Beth add to my answer, but I can assure you that after every incident, we do after action reports and we have recommendations for operational improvements that we look forward to. And I can assure you as well that we've seen over and over and over again how community involvement is probably one of the best initial responses from a help perspective. Our challenges in the past are basically that we have dozens, if not hundreds, of different organizations that all want to come out and help. It's called convergence, when everybody wants to come and help at the incident, and it becomes very, very difficult to manage. So what we need is a program, obviously, that helps us develop all of this before an incident occurs, and then we have less convergence because those who are required to come know that they're there. And that's what part of the discussion, I believe, that Beth can explain, is what we're looking at. And so I'll pass it on to Beth for her to comment further. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Chair, through you. So just to add to what Kim said, we do learn after every situation, and we'll be keeping this committee up to date through We have, for example, a presentation on the Derico that we'll be making, and also through our annual report, we'll be keeping you up to date on program enhancements. A quick example of some of the learnings that we had over the past year was we recognized that we needed new protocols for three things: food security, volunteer management, and wellness visits, to enhance the coordination across city partners and the efficiency and the reach through which we were able to get. So those are just kind of some small examples of program enhancements that we're already making based on lessons observed, and that you'll hear more about when we do our committee updates.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh's next, then Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate all your services. We use you daily, and our office appreciates, for example, Bylaw. We're on the phone with you all the time, and we appreciate very much the work that you've done as fire services, paramedics, everyone. Thank you very much. In terms of just following along with my colleagues about emergency preparedness, I've been through a couple of floods, and I know how much we learned from 2017 to 2019, and just the effectiveness of communities. And I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. One of the things I had suggested at the time was working through a organization like Volunteers Ottawa or something to coordinate volunteers and train them ahead of time, maybe, because they're ready to do things. And I like the term convergence, because that's what happened. Everybody ran out and wanted to fill the sandbag and help out. It was wonderful and heartwarming. But what is the most effective use of volunteers? That's what I'd like to know.
Thank you, through you, Chair, Councillor. Yes, it's exactly that. If we have tasks that are not easy to do, because we know filling sandbags wasn't an easy task, but something that we can do, then we need to be able to manage that. Our challenge is also managing all of the experts out there who come during a converging event where they come in and they decide, I've got all of this knowledge. It'd be better for us to have a system in place beforehand where we understand who's there, when they're available, et cetera. So I know that Beth and her group are working hard at that. I'd like to say it seems simple, but it's actually complicated, but we're certainly looking at that and hopefully be in a better position to come up with a plan that will show you how we could better use our community resources during a state of emergency. And again, it depends on the type of emergency and the type of expertise that comes forward. So,
yeah, thank you. The thing about floods is you can predict them because you see them coming. So it gives you a little more time. Unfortunately, derechos don't give you that opportunity and the other events, but so it's good for everyone to have some preparedness. So I appreciate that. In terms of fire services, false alarms, are they a big contributor to calls? I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you, Councillor. Interesting. We do have a false alarm bylaw that this committee will probably be reviewing this year that we'll be bringing forward. And false alarms probably represent, and I'm just using some rough numbers in my head, but probably close to 35% of our calls. And so they are quite high. And just for the committee's information, we do respond to a lot of alarms that are activated alarms or true alarms, and that's exactly what they're intended to do, to offer that early activation, that early notification, so we can get the right resources on scene to help before situations escalate. But what we're seeing in the industry is you're seeing situations where systems aren't being maintained, and even though inspections are occurring, systems aren't being maintained. There's faults, and we're getting reoccurrences where we're attending 1, 2, 3 times to those addresses, and then now we're assigning a fire prevention inspector to go and follow up on those situations. So there are other large cities in Ontario that have false alarm bylaws, such as Toronto, Hamilton, London. We've done some benchmarkings with those services, and our first line of defense is fire prevention. These alarm systems help with that, and I think there is merit with us having to look at a false alarm bylaw or review that information to see what we have before us.
So that would put the emphasis on the property owner or the building owner.
That's correct. And we're not suggesting that individual residential houses where we're having the difficulty. It's the larger commercial properties where we're getting those multiple calls back and forth. And in some cases, you know, property owners or landlords aren't even on site. So not always the case, but those are some of the trends that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. I think we'd all like to see a reduction till you can get to the real calls and do your job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. We're just starting up with the vacant unit tax, and so far, right on the books, it's a cost. We have a couple of employees that are being hired for it. How are we doing for being on track for being able to set ourselves up to pay for the expenses this is going to cost?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So we were allocated the 2 FTEs related to the vacant property bylaw. Currently, I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, how many permits we've issued at this point, but we will include those numbers in our annual report that we're bringing forward in May. And we will report back after 1 year to provide some information on exactly how many permits have been issued, keeping in mind that this bylaw only took effect in November 1st of last year, and that the requirement is that in the bylaw that those properties requiring a permit have to be vacant for 120 days before they require a permit. So
I'm already hearing cases where we need to look at specific cases where for particular situations. Is there any chance that there's going to be any changes to the bylaw to help those with specific situations where through no fault of their own properties are vacant?
Well, there are exemptions that are provided for in the bylaw. So maybe if there's some one-off incidents that you have, Councillor, maybe we can talk offline, but there's certainly exemptions that are provided for in the bylaw. So currently, we're not hearing of anything that's requiring any kind of bylaw amendment or anything. But again, we're in the preliminary stage of enforcement here. So you know, we can provide any of that information or any recommendations going forward when we do our 1 year analysis.
Thank you. I understand that people are filling out their forms and it's going pretty good. What do we have the numbers yet, or the latest? I've got the latest ones, but is there?
So again, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, I don't want to confuse the two items. So the vacant unit tax and the vacant property bylaw are two entirely different programs. Maybe Cyril could answer any questions on the vacant unit tax, if that's what I think that's what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, I have no issue answering. I don't think it's part of the agenda, but I'm fine to answer if you're okay with it. Yep. As of last week, I think the numbers last week were on 80%, getting there. We're in the stage now of sending another round of communication. So 80% is a significant positive outcome, given we're roughly 5-6 weeks into the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm still focusing my order here on first-time speakers. So Councillor Leeper and then Councillor Hubley. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my question is for Roger on bylaw, and I think I'm picking up on the line of questioning that Councillor King was putting forward. It's great to hear that your calls per officer are going down, and that you're on a path to get to even 2/3 or approaching half the numbers that you were trying to deal with during the peak of the pandemic. But if we pass this budget, the issue that I have around proactive enforcement with dogs in parks. Right across the city, dogs off leash are generating a lot of calls to counselors. We don't seem to have the resources to put in place a consistent, persistent, proactive effort to curb inappropriate owner behaviors. If we pass this budget, are you going to be able to assign more officers to proactive enforcement of dog off leash rules?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Proactive enforcement in parks related to dog activity. I mean, it's challenging for us for sure. There's it's the resources that are required, the number of parks that we have. What we try and do is, generally there's more activity in the parks during the summer months. So generally speaking, we try and create a list of what we consider parks where we're getting a lot of complaints. So we have a list of those parks, and we assign our summer students to monitor those parks on as regular basis as possible. But again, very challenging because it's, different times of the day that people are in these parks. We could be driving through at 8 o'clock in the morning, and maybe the issue's at 10 o'clock in the morning, so we miss them. But we try and get through the problematic parks as often as we can. Increasing the number of summer students certainly, could help with creating some more proactive opportunities for us to do enforcement in city parks.
So how many summer students are we bringing on board right now?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, we support different programs, so there is funding that's provided to us through other services. But currently, over the last few summers, we employ anywhere between 35 to 40 summer students on an annual basis. But again, those summer students are dedicated to very specific programs. Last couple summers, we've had 6 to 8 summer students that are deployed in parks.
So it would take, in order to do a consistent year-round proactive, because one of the problems I find is the folks who are letting their dogs off leash in parks know the rules, and they know that the officers are not as present in the winter months. So is it a matter of having to hire dozens of new officers, or if we as a council wanted you to really crack down on some of these behaviors, is it 10 officers that we need to hire?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, that's a good question. I mean, I'd like to take that away to do some further analysis to see what, based on the amount of calls that we get for parks year round. I can tell you that there's a substantial drop off in calls for park activity in the winter months. And that's generally why we try and focus more in the summer. I think, I'd rather try and pilot something where we're doing some additional, if we can find some funding to do some additional hires for summer students and focus on, having them deployed in the parks, on a daily basis throughout the summer, particularly in those parks where we know there's problems. I think that may help to improve some of the behavior of pet owners.
I'd be interested in talking to you about the cost of that as we're going through this budget process, because it is, I've got 1 or 2 parks. It's not all of the parks in the ward, but 1 or 2 parks that are awesome parks to enjoy, where people's enjoyment of those parks is being rendered inaccessible because of off-leash dogs. And if there is a cost to addressing that, I'd love to know what that is. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Okay, Councillor Hubley, you're next.
Good, thank you. Following along on that theme, Roger. First, I want to thank you and your officers for the excellent work you do every day for us. I'm often amazed at how fast you can get involved in a call and how you can often resolve these calls without tickets needing to be issued, which I think would be everybody's first choice. So thank you for that. Now, what I want to talk to you about, though, is 2 areas that I see room for improvement. One is what Councillor Leeper just talked about not only dogs off leash, but dog waste in the public cans in the park. And the other part that I want to talk about is the household waste being dumped in our parks in those public cans. It's a huge issue. It's something you and I have talked about over the years. I know in the past, last year's budget, I asked about, as Councillor Leeper just did, I asked about getting extra student officers in the summer when this is almost overwhelming burden on the parks crews that are supposed to be taking care of those cans. They can't empty them every day when they're scheduled to be emptied once a week or once every 2 weeks because somebody's decided to put a great big green garbage bag in that bin and block it from anybody else's use. So my question to you, I know Councillor Leeper asked you about 10 officers. If you're going to take this away, I really want to know a number on how many officers you're going to need to service this issue citywide. And I'd like to know it before we pass your final budget coming up at council, because I'll be upfront, I'm not supporting this budget unless you get a lot more student officers out there to deal with these issues this year, because if we're not paying for it in your budget, we're paying for it in the operations budget with the parks people that have to do the additional dumping of the cans every day. The sports fields are getting room from dogs running on them continuously and pet owners not picking up after their dogs. So there's all kinds of other parts of the city that's paying the bill because we're not doing the upfront enforcement on this. So can I get a commitment from you to come back to us before council with a number that you need to add to this budget to make sure that you can service this, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. And yes, we can undertake to do some analysis before council.
Okay, thank you. And maybe, I don't know if you have anybody here dealing with the waste management, but I know last year we had a pilot project where they did put some dog waste cans in one park in each ward. My understanding is that we're not moving ahead with that pilot. I'd like to get some more detail about that and what will we be able to do about getting dog waste cans in there. I know that's not yours, Roger. I'm asking if there's any other staff present here that can address that for us, because it falls into this enforcement part.
Thanks, Chair. I don't see anybody in the room that can deal with that from a Parks and Rec perspective, but I certainly, Community and Social Services would be the proper committee to ask that question to, as they're part of that group. And we could also follow up for you if you wish.
Okay, I'll ask the question again at council, so if somebody can be there to answer it, that'd be perfect. Okay, thank you very much. That's my only questions.
Thank you, Councillor. I will, though, commit on your behalf to follow up on that question. I think that's important. I saw a lot of nodding heads, and I'd like to get some information for you and for our colleagues, so thank you. Okay, second round, we have Councillor Plante and then Deroche. Councillor Plante.
Hi, I'm not sure if this question is for Beth, but just generally to city staff. I know we got some money from the federal government from the convoy protest for the extra hours needed of our police services. I was wondering if our other emergency services got money from the federal government for that long protest.
Through the chair, I'll take that question. So you're correct. So basically the Ottawa Police Services, they have I'll call it somewhat of a long-standing agreement with Public Service Canada. It's a national capital grant for policing in the nation's capital. And historically, city services has not been part of that grant. So when the convoy came into play, obviously that was a significant cost for Ottawa Police and city services. We are working closely with our Ottawa Police Service partners to make sure that our submission, which is part of their submission, is in right now. We haven't got final confirmation in terms of what costs or how much will be reimbursed to the city for city services support, but we are actively part of that partnership with Ottawa Police. In addition, maybe it was a little bit of a question that came up earlier. We're also part of the discussion as we look forward in terms of, you know, should there be an increase to that grant, city services needs to be part of that increase as we move forward. So we are advocating, working with our police service partners to make sure that our city services are also part of that grant, because for the most part, lots of times our services are responding in collaboration with our police service partners.
Thank you. I can appreciate that. And would it be fair to say that it's not just the convoy where there's an increased need for your services. It's whether it's the Women's March or the Climate March. Those all, you guys respond to those as well, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. Canada Day, especially Canada Day. I mean, some of the smaller demonstrations and protests, we may have a smaller role, but definitely in the normal, like your Canada Day events, et cetera, we definitely have a larger part in that we play from a city service perspective.
Thank you. I would agree then that, you know, asking the federal government for some sort of portion of that pie would be absolutely warranted and fair. And if you could keep us appraised of those discussions, I would appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Deloche.
Thanks, Chair. Just some follow-up questions. There's some good questions on fees, which maybe go have a second look at that. And I was really interested in the special events bylaw enforcement officer. And I just want to understand the context in which that would be a service that we provide. In my constituency, I have a school with like 22 portables in it, which is putting massive pressure on our bylaw services. And I think there's certain activities in our city where you exceed the site plan parameters, I think you're into special events. So what triggers a special event that bylaw would be available to a community event? Is that specifically just for special events, or do you make yourself available for other kind of irritants in the community where someone might want to hire bylaw to deal with a major nuisance in the community or pressure, such as no parking or no stopping, et cetera? Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. The special event charge that you see in the user fee bylaw is in accordance with the special events bylaw. So any special event that is considered under that bylaw, that's where those fees are charged. So for you know, when you're talking about having a bylaw officer assigned to say you know, a noise situation or parking situations around the schools, that's something that we do under regular ops. So it's not something that's considered a special event.
No, I appreciate that, but when we have kind of chronic problems that are created, so for example, by 22 portables, this is not available to the school if they wanted to have sort of this kind of more full-time commitment. This service is really just for special events that you would need a special event permit. I'm just trying to understand the context in which someone would phone you up and say, hey, I want to get some bylaw officers and I'm willing to pay for it because it's an irritant or it's a problem in the community.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, that's a great question. Again, that the user fee section that you see there, that is very specific to special events, but there has been opportunities in the past where, you know, we've asked for, there's been a request for a dedicated bylaw resource, whether that's a parking control officer or a bylaw officer, and we do have a charge back that we can enter into an agreement with them, and we can invoice them for the cost of that dedicated resource.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'll explore it further offline, and I think it comes in response to some of the questions about, you know, you being stretched and being able to respond to all the demands right across the city. Last question is on dog licensing. And prior to the election, the provincial government waived the fees for the license plate renewal. I'm sure people have different views on the motives for that or what have you. Is there any items in here that, you know, we really need to go back and look at and say, do we really need to license, you know, dogs and cats just on an annual basis, or do we need to charge a fee? You know, it's not 1960 where, you know, dogs are on the loose. You know, in fact, social media often sort of helps lead to kind of the reunification of the pets. So just on dogs and cats licensing and that, you know, that annual obligation that we have, you know, is that something we could look at in the context of what we saw in Ontario, that maybe we just don't need to charge a fee? Our technology is there that the fee is not necessary to oversee.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Councillor, for the question. Keeping in mind that these fees again are for cost recovery on enforcement costs, inspections, and also the administration costs that we have. We do analysis on a yearly basis on all our user fees, and this one in particular, I don't have the exact number in front of me of how many pets that we return home on an annual basis, but I can tell you that it's always a happy reuniting when we're able to capture a dog that's running at large and has an Ottawa license hanging from its tag, and we're able to, or from its collar, sorry, and we're able to return that pet home to the owners. So I mean, there's lots of successful reunitings through the use of those tags, but also it gives us the ability to identify animals when we have other situations like dog bites and things. So we find that it's a very useful to have those licenses affixed to those animals.
Okay, I don't doubt that. And maybe that's part of our program review when we undertake that exercise. I think if we were looking at some of our regulatory programs here and we were starting them anew, we would be asking, like, is the cost benefit worth it here for us to have a regime here? So again, I'll maybe raise it through another exercise that we're going to undertake, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions for staff on the budget? Seeing none, is there anyone that wants to debate the item? This is your time. Seeing none, I think we're prepared to vote then. As a reminder, Councillor Luloff indicated a matter that he cannot vote on, and I believe that matter is item 3, Ottawa Fire Services, Part B, the operating resource requirement, first I, the communications section. So Councillor Luloff, I am going to suggest you recuse yourself at this time, and we're going to vote on that particular matter first, and then we'll come back and deal with the rest of the budget if you agree with that process.
I really appreciate that, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if you could please step away from the meeting. All right, colleagues, on the matter, specifically on item 3B small I, is that item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
All right, Councillor Luloff, please return. Does any member want any part of the budget voted on separately, or are we prepared to vote together?
Mr. Chair, I'll dissent until we get the answer before council about the bylaw FTs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hubley. So on the matter of the entire budget, is that matter carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Councillor Hubley's dissent is noted. Thank you very much, staff, on this matter. Appreciate the excellent answers to the questions from committee members. And to all members of council, if you have other questions, need staff assistance, if you're considering motions, please get that in earlier as opposed to later to assist with the preparation that's required for any type of motion. Okay, the next item on the agenda is item 6, which is the council motion that was referred to us from council. It's the motion to support Bill 47. And Councillor Devine, I would look to you if you could just advise the committee what's changed in the motion in particular. And I'd ask that you read the therefore clauses to get them on the record. So Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to what's changed with the motion, well, and I'm not sure what part of the motion this is technically called, but the actual the object of the motion, the motion is no longer a motion to support Bill 47 because the scope of the motion is larger. So I'll just read the actual motion purpose, if that's what it's called. It's a motion to ensure the safety and dignity of vulnerable residents during power outages. As for the elements that have changed, there is a recital. There are a few recitals that have changed. One in regards to the fact that, I'm not sure if Chair, if you want me to read the recitals that have changed. There's a recital with regards to a letter of support from Hydro Ottawa. That recital reads, whereas Hydro Ottawa CEO Bryce Conrad has written a letter to myself conveying his full support of this motion, stating that, quote, contingencies such as backup emergency generators ensure multi-unit residents remain safe, particularly vulnerable populations, while reducing added demand on public service. That's from his letter. Another recital that has changed is the presentation of information that Toronto has put in place, has long held in place guidelines that we don't have. I'll read that recital.
Councillor, it's okay on the whereas statements. The motion is before committee members. I just want you to flag those just to highlight what has changed.
To the second flag that Toronto has a guideline in place that I'll be referring to in my where be it resolved. And then the final recital that Toronto City Council passed a very similar motion to mine last week. And so the be it resolved, therefore be it resolved that Ottawa City Council express its support for Bill 47, Protecting Human Rights in an Emergency Act, Emergency Power Generators 2022. And be it further resolved that City Council forward this item to local MPPs, the Premier, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for information. And be it further resolved that Council direct staff to review Toronto's minimum backup power guidelines for multi-unit residential buildings, voluntary performance standards for existing and new buildings 2016, and to report back in Q3 of 2023 on the resources required for the preparation of an Ottawa version of such a guideline.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for that. So that is now on the table. We do have 3 registered delegations on this matter that we'll hear from first, and then we will enter into debate on the matter. We do have, like I said, 3 delegations, and the first is MPP Chandra Pasma. Is the MPP online?
They're being promoted.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Pasma, we can. You have 5 minutes. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, and thank you, Chair. And thank you to Councillor Devine for putting this motion forward. I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak to you about it today and to share more about the importance of the Protecting Human Rights in an Emergency Act. This bill was inspired by the experience of Ottawa residents during the derecho last year, when the power outage left many people without power for as many as 12 to 14 days. For people with mobility issues living in an apartment or condo buildings, this was a human rights disaster. But sadly, it wasn't the first time Ottawa has experienced such a disaster. The tornado in 2018 also knocked out power for multiple days, and we risk having more of these severe kinds of storms in the future. However, I've also heard stories from residents that even shorter, more localized power outages have a very detrimental effect when residents end up being trapped because of them. To say that people are trapped is really to gloss over the kind of suffering and the dangerous situations that people have experienced without access to an elevator or water. I believe you're going to hear Lynn Ashdown's story from her personally in a few moments, but let me tell you some of the other stories that I've heard. A senior who uses a walker had to evacuate 17 stories going down the stairs on her bum, one step at a time. A man in his late 60s carried his 2 elderly neighbors, both in their 80s, down 8 flights of stairs. A couple, including a woman in a wheelchair, were trapped in their apartment on the 12th floor for 5 days after the tornado. Their children had to climb 12 flights of stairs daily with food and water for them because they couldn't be evacuated. They were lucky because in that same building, a woman who lives on the 15th floor had no one to come and bring her food. She survived on the jar of peanut butter that she had in her apartment. An older woman in a different building was trapped on the 15th floor after the derecho. Neighbors brought her food and water since she couldn't get out, but she lost income because she worked from home and couldn't get to a spot where she could access internet. She's so afraid of losing power again that she currently stores buckets full of water around her apartment, just in case. A woman who was new to Ottawa when the derecho hit didn't have any social network here yet, so she was forced to drive back to Sudbury just to get help until the water came back on. A woman who had heart surgery right before the tornado had to be evacuated by the Ottawa Fire Services from an 18th floor apartment. They walked her down 1 flight at a time, sitting down to rest between every flight of stairs. A man who had a serious injury during the power outage last May and was bleeding profusely had to walk down 10 flights of stairs to meet an ambulance. A woman with a newborn baby and 2 other children under 10 struggled to get her kids down 9 stories and back up again. She said it was nearly impossible with the lack of light to go down after a certain hour. The gymnastics she had to undergo to keep her 3 children safe were not something she would ever want to repeat, and the lack of water in her home felt very unsafe. Neighbors told me of the work that they did to try to look after one another, but they felt abandoned by their landlords and by their governments. Many of them paid a financial cost, spending nights in a hotel room because their home was uninhabitable or they couldn't get in and out. Some of them paid a physical cost. Hearing the stories of residents, I now understand it's a miracle that no one has died yet due to lack of medical care during a power outage or because of an accidental fall on dark stairs. But many of them have also paid a psychological cost. These experiences have caused incredible trauma. Residents are terrified with every storm that the power is going to go out again and they will be trapped once again. And there is, of course, also a cost to the city to have Ottawa Fire Services evacuate residents or fill bathtubs with water, to send public health officials or paramedics to do wellness checks instead of being able to concentrate on emergency response. And what's frustrating is how unnecessary this is. Residents of other buildings don't face these challenges because those buildings have generators installed. Once upon a time, buildings didn't all have smoke detectors and fire alarms, but we decided that the cost to human life was too great to leave it up to personal choice to install them. That time has come for generators now. That's why the City of Toronto, which has also experienced these challenges, created a voluntary standard in 2016, and last week, Toronto Council passed a motion endorsing my bill. I hope that Ottawa residents can count on our council to also protect their human rights and support this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pasma, for your delegation. There are some questions, so Councillor Devine will start off.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, MPP Pasma, for delegating here today, and thank you also for bringing the motion forward as a whole, which I trust will serve the safety and benefits of the residents of our city. And it's certainly it resonates on me, the list of incidents you described and how you mentioned that in certain buildings, they did not have the same kind of experience. I saw that where on one side of a street, people went through what you talked about, and on the other side of the street, because they had a generator in place during the derecho, they did not go through anything of what you referred to. So there is a lack of harmonization. Now, I wanted to ask you, because the question will come up about funding, the need for funding for implementation of these. And I understand that as opposed to motions at City Hall, where if there is to be a cost, we have to put the cost in the motion. With private members' bills, you cannot speak to costs in private members' bills. But you mentioned to me, and I just want my colleagues to hear that when you do present your private members' bill in February, you will be speaking about the need for provincial funding for this. So could you please just speak a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Devine. The experience of people who are living in buildings that are owned by not-for-profit landlords like community housing or cooperatives are identical to those that are living in buildings that are owned by for-profit landlords. They experience the same kind of trauma from being trapped, the same kinds of costs, the same kind of dangers if the generator's not in place. I think we can all agree on that. I've spoken to the not-for-profit housing provincial organizations who agree that this kind of bill is necessary, this kind of measure is necessary. They do, of course, have some concerns around the costs. Not that they don't think the cost is not worthwhile, but the cost of installing generators in their whole property within a 6-month window. But I think given the cost to our residents, given the cost to our community, this is really a whole of community problem to solve, not just a problem for these not-for-profit landlords to resolve. You're absolutely correct. The rules around private members' business mean that I can't explicitly put anything around funding in the bill. But it is certainly something that I think in passing, the provincial government would have a moral obligation to provide support for these not-for-profit housing providers to make sure that we are respecting the rights of all of our residents, even in the midst of the worst emergencies.
Thank you. And just one more follow-up question. I understand that I know you're working with municipalities across Ontario to garner support for this. In the conversations you've had with my counterparts at Toronto City Council, who just passed their motion last week, did you hear back from my counterparts at Toronto City Council about many objections to your motion, to your bill?
Absolutely not. As I mentioned, Toronto has already created a voluntary standard. What my bill does is codify that voluntary standard. My understanding is that much like Ottawa has looked into this in 2018 after the tornado and in 2022 after the derecho, the city of Toronto looked into it after they experienced some extreme weather events. And we're told, unfortunately, municipalities can't forge ahead on their own with legislation. It's a provincial jurisdiction. That's why they created the voluntary standard, but they see the need for provincial legislation, a need that was also recognized by City Council last June after the derecho. So they're happy that, there's finally some action coming at the provincial level on this issue.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Kavanaugh and then Councillor Lula.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, Ms. Pasma, for bringing this motion forward. This is something I've seen up close from 2018, watching people in buildings after the outage then through the tornado, climbing up 20 stories and visiting people who were terrified. It was something else. So I remember being very frustrated because my first thing I did was visit our city staff, but it's not a city matter, it's a provincial matter. And so I appreciate very much that you've taken this initiative. It's really important. I think one of the things that caught me by surprise, and I think a lot of people find it unusual, is that it's not just about power, but explain the water issue.
Yes, absolutely. So many of the taller buildings, the water pumps only work if there's power. And so we have a number of buildings where the water pumps failed immediately when the power went out as well. And so people on higher floors didn't have access to water, which already on the surface of it sounds bad enough. People had to go up and down 12, 18 flights of stairs carrying bottles of water just to be able to drink. But of course, it's not just the drinking water, right? It's your toilet, it's your shower. So my office is right next to some apartment buildings in Parkwood Hills. They're just out my window. People couldn't flush their toilets for a week. So they're trapped in the dark with no ventilation, with toilets that couldn't flush. Finally, after a week, the Ottawa Fire Service came and filled bathtubs with water, which allowed them to do that. The city thankfully set up respite services last May, which was incredibly important for many of our residents, but you could only access those respite services if you could get in and out of your home. And many people living in apartment buildings could not. So they did not have access to those showers, to that drinking water, to any of the services, even to be able to charge your phone or your device. And many of these buildings too, the lack of light is also an issue because you're not only navigating the stairs with your bottles of water, but you're doing it in the dark, or you're trying to get your key into your door in a dark hallway with absolutely no light. So it was an incredibly traumatic experience for residents.
Thank you. I understand from my experience anyway, that most condo buildings were fine because they have condo boards and they managed to have generators at some point. They thought ahead, but it was private buildings that were a problem. And by the way, Ottawa Community Housing also had generators as well. But in terms of the private buildings, that seemed to be the bulk of the issues.
That's certainly my understanding as well. There are some condo buildings that are affected. My understanding from most of them is that they're condo buildings, but many of them tend to be primarily occupied by tenants. There's definitely a need to address the issue with all buildings, but I think one of the concerns that we have is that it seems to be large, fairly profitable landlords who are for the most part failing to install these generators and leaving their tenants without access to elevators and water in times of emergency.
Just for my knowledge, what size building are we talking about in terms of number of stories? Is this for just any building that has an elevator? Is that correct?
Yeah, the bill says any building that has an elevator. I think if you have mobility issues, you're not moving into a building that has multiple flights of stairs. But the existence of an elevator in your building creates an expectation of mobility and of being able to get in and out.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Luloff, you're next.
Thank you very much for joining us today. It's always a bit awkward to have a member of another order of government come to speak to us. So we've had a senator last week at Transportation Committee, and now you're here. So slightly awkward. So if you don't mind my questions, I just want to understand the scope of what's being proposed here. So is this for complete power of a building? Because you're mentioning other amenities other than lifts. So is it just for partial power for lifts and water only? Just to give us a sense of what the scope of this is.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. And I don't mind speaking to another order of government. It's a fun change for the day. The bill is restricted to running a generator that can run one elevator, the water pump, and lights in common areas. I know that in an ideal scenario, we would have generators that would provide full power. It's not lost on me that if the weather was not exactly what it was last May, we would have had a massive humanitarian disaster, freezing cold weather or super hot weather. People's homes would have been completely uninhabitable without power, whether they had mobility issues or not. But what I understand from speaking with engineers is that the cost to install a generator that could fully power the building is significant. For many buildings, we'd be talking on the order of $700,000 to $1 million. But because of the building code's requirements for emergency lights, most buildings have the capacity to retrofit for a generator that can run these three things relatively inexpensively compared to full power.
So how do we deal with older buildings without the footprint or the space to accommodate this? Should this pass at your level?
There's no requirement in the bill whatsoever as to how and where the generator is installed. They only have to install that generator capacity. And so, I leave it up to the architects and the engineers to decide how that's best done according to different types of buildings.
That's great for new buildings, but what about older buildings that don't have the space on their property to be able to accommodate this?
I'm not aware that there are buildings that would be absolutely unable to install a generator.
Okay. So what funding source are you proposing for this?
So for-profit landlords, that the landlord would be responsible. But as I mentioned in response to Councillor Devine's question, I think there's a larger community obligation when we're talking about not-for-profit housing providers like community housing.
Have you done a calculation as to what the provincial tax increase would have to be to pay for this for that contingent?
No, because there is no provincial amount of money proposed.
So what is the funding source for community housing then, and for that second tier that you've identified? You've kind of separated into for-profit housing and also not-for-profit housing. So who's paying for it?
Well, as I mentioned, I think it's up to all of us to help those not-for-profit housing providers provide that support to install the generator. So I will call for provincial funding to be provided. I wouldn't worry too much about that side if I were you. The Conservative government is sitting on $6 billion in unallocated funding, so I think Ontario could come up with the funding quite easily.
So with their official plan, calling for 50% of growth coming from intensification, how will we implement it? Are you saying that this will have to be 100% provincial money? How do we implement this without making housing less affordable? Because this is an added cost to any building, and that obviously that builders will pass on that cost.
It's not a significant cost based on the conversations that I've had with engineers. And I think at a certain point, we have to ask ourselves, not what is the cost, but who's paying the cost? Because right now we are asking our lowest income tenants, our seniors, our people with disabilities, our parents of young children the city of Ottawa, our fire services, our paramedics, and our public health to pay the cost. And what my bill is saying is that it is not unreasonable to ask profitable landlords to pay that cost instead.
But we're not quite certain what that cost is, like on aggregate right yet, right?
Well, because there's no requirement, there's also no count about how many buildings do not have a generator already.
Understood. So is there any prescription? Is there any prescription in this legislation for what the fuel source is going to be for a generator like this? So having, a bunch of diesel generators running downtown all at the same time, is there any consideration for that and emissions and that sort of thing?
There's no prescription, only what the generator has to be capable of powering. There are solar options for generators. But I would also say, when we're talking about a diesel generator, we're talking about it running occasionally, not constantly, right? And with independent or individual homes, there were people who were running generators after the derecho, and we understood that that was short-term and necessary, and that's why bylaws around noise levels were waived during the night. This isn't something where these buildings are going to be constantly powered by diesel.
Okay, thanks for your answers today.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. And thank you, Ms. Pasma, for your delegation today and taking questions. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me, everyone.
Okay, we do have two other delegates. One has a schedule issue, so I'm going to ask that Mr. Conrad, Bryce Conrad, be promoted next, and then we'll hear from Dr. Ashton. Mr. Conrad, please. Good afternoon. Please go ahead.
So I was just excited you were promoted me, so I'm very excited. I will make this very short and sweet. Obviously we've tabled a letter of support for the motion. It's similar to the level of support that we provided to the motion that Councillor Eglai and the mayor tabled last June at our annual general meeting. Obviously, you all saw the newspapers on the weekend saying that Ottawa is now the weather alert capital of Canada. So I can just speak to the impacts of climate change that we're seeing. 1 in 1,000 year flood in 2017, 8 tornadoes in 2018, 2019, and 1 in 100 year floods in 2019. We've had more ice storms and windstorms that I care to shake a stick at. And I won't even refer to the storm last May because I still feel it's bad luck. But suffice to say, climate change is here. It is happening. And with that, multi-day outages are not a question of if they're going to happen. It's a question of when they will happen. So we've made millions of dollars in investments in the electricity grid, all to ensure that you have reliable, safe power. But that doesn't stand up to Mother Nature when she wants to kick her ass. So simple as that. I'll happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'm good. Thanks, councilors.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Any questions? Councillor Luloff.
I'm still having trouble figuring out where the funding source is from, as this is a PMB. Is this something that Ottawa Hydro, through our dividends, could pay for to buy everyone a generator, Bryce?
Well, my job is to give you as big a dividend as I possibly can, Councillor. Your job is to spend it. So I wouldn't tell you how to spend it. So no, I don't believe that would be the appropriate means.
Do you have an idea of what the total cost this would be? Have you guys done any analysis on this? It just doesn't seem like there's a whole bunch of background work that's been done on what the total cost of this would be.
I have none. I have no idea what the total cost of this would be, Councillor, if I'm being honest with you. The stories that the previous delegate spoke of are the same stories I heard of during the derecho storm. So no, we know there are houses, there are apartment buildings in our service territory that don't have backup generation. I don't have a number as to how many of those are or how significant they are.
Fair enough. I feel like you're probably the expert that we're going to have today on things like loading and whatnot, and what it takes to run pumps and elevators and whatnot. So take a look at like a Claridge tower, or 3 towers where you've got something like 1,500 apartments and that sort of thing. Just like what kind of what kind of generator are we talking about to power a site like that? And do you have any idea what one of those might cost? Generally.
Yeah, it would really depend. So an apartment building of say 300 units. So that's one of the ones that I'd heard of during the derecho where people were sort of abandoned above they couldn't get water above the 7th floor, I believe it was. I think, the previous delegate saying, between 7 and 1 million is probably a good number to guess at. Just to give you a sense, my building, which you all know of, I have 4 massive generators powering this building in the event of us that we go down. So each one of those is $1 million plus. So this is not an insignificant undertaking, Councillor, if that's the point you're trying to get across. Yeah.
No, I'm not trying to get a point across. I'm trying to learn here. And I do really appreciate that. No one wants to see somebody, have to go without water. It was certainly a godsend during the 6 days that I was without power as well during the derecho that, while I couldn't take a hot shower for sure, probably wouldn't be wanting to run, gas and that sort of thing without the power to regulate it. And that, it was a godsend to be able to, wash dishes, clean up and, maintain some sort of sanitary environment. So I totally understand, why it's important that everybody remains, able to have some potable water. But I do really appreciate your answers. Thanks, Bryce.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Devine and then Johnson. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Conrad, for being here. And I do appreciate my colleagues, the various questions from my colleagues about costs of implementation. I think those are valuable questions. And I also think that those are questions that will likely be, the chore of staff to go back and review what the cost for implementation here is. What we're debating here today is the need. And aside from the cost of this action, the thing to be considered is the cost of inaction. If we were, how many decades ago, if we were having a debate about the cost of implementation of sprinkler systems in apartment buildings, what would the cost be now of inaction of implementing sprinkler systems? As to the question I'd like to ask for Mr. Conrad, and I'll be asking these questions to staff as well. On the nature of diversion of resources, so yourself as as our primary utility during this power outage, would you say that you had to divert a lot of resources towards trying to get power back up at these buildings so that basic necessities could be taken care of? And are those resources that if these buildings had generators, you could be attending to other matters of a higher priority? Does the lack of having these generators in place slow you down from taking care of other priorities?
I'm just trying to sort of reflect back on the May event, Councillor. I guess the short answer is probably yes. Obviously, our restoration plans are, we aim to put critical infrastructure back on first. So whether it's the Robert O. Pickard Environmental Center, the water treatment plant, the airports, the hospitals, those are our top priority in the event of an outage. Beyond that, we then go into kind of, bang for our buck. So can we pick up 5 or 10 or 15,000 customers by doing a little bit of work? So that became our priority. But once we got down to the sort of the call it hand-to-hand combat, for lack of a better term, yeah, I mean, you as councillors, your predecessors were expressing a certain healthy level of anxiety with respect to a number of buildings in your specific wards where either they didn't have access to water or there were, there was no light or there's no mobility assistance wasn't available. So yeah, that becomes, we start to divert and move crews to sort of support those cases. But I guess I wouldn't overplay that in the sense that that's what we do anyway. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Mr. Conrad, how are you?
Good, Shelf.
Good, thank you. So you are a unapologetically for-profit company, are you not?
If I had a tattoo, that would be it. Yeah.
Yes, that's when I ask a question I already know the answer to. So as a unapologetically for-profit company, how much of your revenue have you been diverting or applying to storm hardening efforts in the last so many years in response to these events?
That's a great question. I don't know that we pull out specifically the storm hardening numbers, but it would be in the we're doing, let's say, $130 million of capital work a year. So storm hardening would be, just improving renewing the systems, probably about half of that.
And why are you undertaking those storm hardening activities at this time? What's your rationale?
Well, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to plan for the future. So we're supposed to plan and make sure that our system is robust and reliable so that every business and resident of the city of Ottawa can depend on us, which fortunately they do.
Right.
But if you're asking me in terms of climate change and adaptation, absolutely. I referenced the velocity of the storms that we're seeing now are different than the velocity of the storms that we saw even when I started 12 years ago. No one ever thought we'd have a tornado in downtown Nepean. No one ever thought we didn't even know what that storm was called in May until it hit. No one's at 190 kilometers an hour, Council. You are 14 kilometers away from the highest wind speed ever recorded in Canada. So that's not normal.
Right. So can I assume then that what you're doing is you are investing in storm hardening activities so that you can deliver on your basic agreement with the people of Ottawa, which is to provide service in the way they've always expected?
Correct.
Okay. So I wonder if there's a parallel here perhaps to what we're asking some of our landlords to do when they enter into rental agreements with these people, that they are intended to provide a basic level of service in really like as a transactional relationship with the rent that they pay. And perhaps this could be considered also a storm hardening investment. So thank you for the line of inquiry.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mr. Conrad, for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Our final delegate today is Dr. Lynn Ashdown. Dr. Ashdown, I see you on the screen. If you could just unmute, please.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Dr. Lynn Ashdown, resident of Ward 9. For context, I'm a wheelchair user. Bill 47 was inspired by me after my horrific experience of being trapped in my apartment for 10 days after the derecho. I'd like to share with you a video. And I believe there's a member of staff that can share with you a video.
It is getting pretty dire here. And it's hard because, you hear the city, they set up stations, charging stations for people who don't have power so they can charge their equipment, they can take a hot shower. Again, I can't do any of that. I can't get out of my apartment. So I also can't get my regular PSW care. So when disaster strikes, sort of the people that need the help the most actually tend to get dropped first. Things continue to be a struggle. The local public health unit actually even came by to do to check to see if you need anything, and I actually need to get out of my apartment building. I need an elevator that should run on a generator if the power goes out. And that's not that big of an ask. And so 7 days now I've been stuck alone stuck in my own thoughts with no power. And also, it's really hard to always feel like with a disability that you're thought of last. You're an afterthought. You're a second-class citizen. Don't know how much longer I can hold on. My medical issues are now worsening. My mental health is worsening. It's I can tell you it's a terrible feeling to be stuck in the dark 24/7, wheeling around in a wheelchair, bumping into walls because you can't see where you're going, and with
Am I back now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what you just saw, though triggering for me right now, was raw footage from when I was stuck. Well, that is me in the video. When I watch that, I don't recognize that person. That person in the video is someone who has been abandoned by society, left to endure the dangers and indignities that result from a lack of protection for basic human rights. That was a person who suffered a physical, emotional, and financial cost. Not wanting anyone else to go through what I went through, I reached out to my councillor and MPP PASMA about how to protect tenants during power outages. Bill 47 came to fruition. The narrative here is far greater than me and disability, though. People with a plethora of medical issues, like we heard from MPP PASMA, the elderly, and families with small children come to mind. Many people simply can't do numerous flights of stairs. Increased urbanization means more people will be living in high-rise buildings, with the heights of these buildings getting higher also. Even a person in great health would struggle with 50+ flights of stairs in extreme weather. I know of apartment buildings in Ottawa whose owners have elected to have backup generators. I applaud them for protecting their tenants, not because a law tells them they have to, but because it's the right thing to do. This shows that it is possible and reasonable to do this. We need to acknowledge climate change and prepare for subsequent extreme weather patterns, as we know these systems will continue to impact our cities at increasing rates. A reminder that the moderate temperature after the derecho was what prevented people from suffering from hypothermia and heat stroke. I don't ask myself if I will get stuck in my apartment, because I know that I will. I already have. I ask myself, how long will I be stuck? How quickly will it become life-threatening? And when will those elected to protect citizens step up and do the right thing? I formally call on Ottawa to support Bill 47, the way that Toronto City Council did last week. I leave you with this question. If it had been you or a loved one in that situation, like I was in, what would you have wanted? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, including sharing the video with us. I do have some questions from my colleagues, and I'll start with Councillor Devine and then Kavanaugh. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Dr. Ashdown, for being here and for presenting. Now, you and I have spoken, you're a really, really strong advocate for the rights of those with disabilities, and I very much appreciate your stances on that. And you and I have spoken about the issue of paratransport and accessible taxis, and I remember you telling me quite clearly that, especially in winter, you have a completely reasonable amount of anxiety just on the prospect of wanting to leave your house because you don't have the same kind of assurance of coming home as I do when I leave my house. Having been through a tornado myself, I know that my kids have a certain level of anxiety whenever we know another storm is coming, and I see the display of that anxiety. With what you went through, the self that you don't even recognize anymore, with what we saw on that video, with the full expectation that we will have other storms, and with the current status quo that nothing is currently different than how it was in May. Therefore, if we have another outage, you would have the same experience. Could you please describe the kind of anxiety that you might experience knowing that a storm and a power outage could come if you were to relive that same experience?
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Devine, for that question. One thing that came to mind when MPP Pasma was presenting is she repeatedly spoke about trauma. And that is absolutely, this didn't just happen during the derecho. This also happened to me during the tornado, no water and no power for 4 days. So this isn't the first time that extreme patterns have happened like this. With regards to sort of the way my behavior has changed after May, I went to the extreme of actually purchasing what they use in flights as a carry, like to carry people with wheelchairs on. If the transport wheelchair doesn't fit, they actually have it's sort of like a carry sort of bag kind of thing that you actually can physically, people with handles can actually physically carry you. I bought that out of my own money because I don't have any assurance that anybody in society is going to help me out, and that what I need to do is that I need to basically rely on the good nature of, you know, friends, etc., that can come and physically carry me out, that actually aren't trained to do that either. I can speak to right before Christmas, if you all remember, there was sort of that sort of what they were calling the monster sort of storm, and they were telling people to not travel and to stay at home and to expect power outages. That's another time I wasn't myself, because what plays through my mind is the difference between May and December was that my time would be very limited in my apartment. And that is the saving grace. The only reason that I was even able to last the 10 days in May was because of the moderate temperatures. So the anxiety that I had in those predictions about expecting power outages, etc., I can't even begin to explain the amount of trauma and psychological fear that I had. I have multiple apps installed on my phone, all set to warn me about incoming weather alerts. I never had that before. The trauma is real, and it will not go away until something changes. And this is where I need the people elected to really help, not just people like me, but everybody in all of the situations similar to mine.
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned that at the end, that this is definitely not just about you. I very much appreciate that you're here today. But as this is about anybody in your situation facing mobility issues, people who are trying to figure out how to walk up a dark flight of stairs carrying a case of water, people wondering when they'll be able to flush their toilet after 5 days or 6, 7, 8 days. This is not just about you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashdown.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for coming out today. Lynn, I appreciate your courage and for speaking out, because you're not just speaking out for yourself, you're speaking out for a whole community of people, hundreds, if not thousands. And I think that's important to remember. And what is the cost of that? What is the cost of thousands of lives that are put at risk? Is the question we have to ask ourselves when we look at this legislation. Climate change has certainly changed everything. I just want to give you an example. In the city of Ottawa, in my ward alone, we've decided to put in generators for pumping stations. These are stations that pump sewer out of, move it along to get it out. So if those pumping stations didn't work during a power outage, you'd have a sewer in your basement because it would not be pumped. I'm just using this as an example. Do we as politicians question this? No, we know this is the new reality of climate change, that we're paying for pumping stations with generators. We have to have generators now. This is 4, just in my ward. I'm just aware of those examples. And so I think, what is the cost for a building? It's just part of climate change. Would you agree?
I would agree. Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh, for the comments and questions. I would agree. This is sort of what MPP Pasma was talking about, was that, you know, at one time it was unheard of to force people to have smoke detectors in apartment buildings, et cetera. And as society changes and climate change is real and causing more extreme weather patterns. We heard that from CEO, I forget his name, but CEO of Hydro Ottawa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he mentioned that as well. We're seeing weather events more and more. I've been in Ottawa my entire life. And so the concentration of weather events that we've had in the last 5 years is so much greater than I remember for my entire life before that. And so, you know, again, while I appreciate that everyone does have to ask a question about financial cost, there is more to it than just a financial cost. There's a cost of life. Are we putting a dollar value on my life? Are you telling me that my life isn't worth $20,000? And I don't think that anybody wants to have a price tag put on their life, or whether you're worth it or not, because that's sort of the, you know, when we're talking about the financial cost, that's what it comes down to, is people are impacted. Are they worth it financially or not? And I say that every human being is worth it, and that it's within every elected official's position to put the safety of Ontarians first, and the safety of the Ottawa residents, the residents first. And you know, and you spoke about, Councillor Kavanaugh, also about how while I am a bit of the face of this actually isn't about me. This is truly because of stories that I had heard, and truly knowing how traumatized and how impacted I've been. I know that there are so many people that don't have the resources or the courage to be able to speak out. And that's why I'm speaking. Even being here today, watching that video was traumatizing for me. Hearing MPP Pasma talk about all of the scenarios, it broke my heart piece by piece, because I know exactly how they were feeling. And so again, we talk about trauma, me being here, and I want to be here because I want to be part of the solution. But there are real costs to this beyond just a financial cost. So thank you for highlighting that.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I met many of those residents when I was in buildings in 2018. It was just mind-blowing. People who were on oxygen, who lived on the 20th floor and were just terrified. So I appreciate your courage, because you are speaking for many people. And like I said, our own city has realized the importance of this on keeping up our infrastructure system. So I think this should be part of any infrastructure system. Climate change is now a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Councillor Kavanaugh. And seeing no other questions, thank you, Dr. Ashdown, for your presentation, for being with us today. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the councillor's motion is on the table. Questions, debate? Are we prepared to vote on the matter? Oh, Councillor Hill, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Devine, for bringing this forward. And certainly this is a great discussion to have, because as we can see, there are real people involved here, and the impacts of, you know, our influences are obviously what's going to drive forward in terms of making a difference for the folks in our community. Personally, I would use the litmus test that we need to treat all people with dignity and respect as a core azimuth check to the direction that we're moving on. And certainly, I feel certainly for the delegates that we've had that have spoken to the issues, and I do think that we need to look at this issue. My concern here is the process. I would prefer to see this be staff-led in terms of a staff inquiry to look into options and considerations, and to then bring back a fulsome analysis that could come back that's fully business planned, that we can then debate in order to look at how, from a municipal perspective, we could actually put some meat on the bones here. I don't believe that the motion that we're going to be voting on today is saying, yes, we do want people in buildings with elevators to have access to, the critical supports that they need, or no. I see this as sending a signal on behalf of the city to the province that from that perspective is going to potentially put us in a position where we're signing a check that we don't know what that's going to look like because we haven't got the business plan aligned here. We do not know what the cost of this would look like. We don't know the cost sharing arrangements in terms of the provincial obligations, municipal obligations, private developers, landlords, condo associations, and I don't have an appreciation for the broad spectrum of where this issue really needs to have investment. I consider OCH as an example. I know we have the chair here. I don't want to put you on the spot to speak to it, but I don't know what would that mean to their business plan if they were imposed to implement a program like this over a certain period of time. And we don't have that period of time. Would this be a 6-month, implementation plan, a 5-year implementation plan? Those are the types of details that I think are important in order for us to understand the kind of the business side to this and the costing side to this. So I would personally prefer to see this motion be an inquiry to staff to look at the options and then bring that back so that we can make an informed decision in due course in terms of the appropriate investments that could perhaps be made in the 24 budget, or generally speaking, what we should be looking at as a policy for the city. But my concern would be, I don't want to call it an empty signal to the province because it's not that, but I'm a person of action. I would like to see us take action on this as opposed to simply give a signal that we would like to take action, because I would be concerned about what we're telling people if we move forward progressing this motion and what that actually means, because in some ways there's a false hope implication to that, because we're not actually assigning any resources to what this motion looks like. So from that perspective, I'd be interested to hear Councillor Devine, your perspective.
Well, hold on. Councillor Devine can speak to the matter like every other member. I can put Councillor Devine on the list. I just want to draw your attention, Councillor Hill, to the third part of the motion, which is directing staff to review what Toronto's done and to report back on resources required should we do something like that in Ottawa. So there is that component there. I would prefer to take speakers in order. So Councillor Devine, if you want to speak, please add yourself to the list. And that, I know you raised your hand, Councillor Kavanaugh, but I've just added you to the list as well, and you can provide whatever input you'd like on behalf of OCH at that time. So Councillor Luloff, I have you next, and then Johnson, and then Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There's no doubt that this is a serious issue. I don't think anyone denies the importance that we ensure that everyone in our city has access to potable water and the ability to get in and out of their apartments in case of emergency. Without question, that is a major concern. And serious issues require serious analysis. And I feel that Councillor Hill's comments are quite poignant, and that today we may be just paying lip service to this. It feels good to say that this is, that we support a private member's bill that's clearly under provincial jurisdiction. But I think that this really deserves so much more. We have incredible staff at the City of Ottawa that can do the analysis on this, get an idea of what this is going to entail. I still don't have a solid answer on, what the funding source of this is. Is this going to be, partially funded by the city? Is it going to be, a partnership with the federal government, with the provincial government? There are just too many questions. I really like to make decisions based on the best information available. I don't feel that we have that information. This is a serious issue that deserves serious analysis, so that we make sure that we're actually doing what we want to do, and that's ensure that people have access to potable water and the ability to get in and out of their apartments in case of an emergency. So I worry that simply by doing this, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, yeah, we supported this private member's bill, and then we can wash our hands of it. I think that there's obviously more analysis that needs to be done in advocacy with other local MPPs. I have questions that don't have satisfactory answers right now. But again, no one denies that this is an important issue and one that needs to be tackled. The question is, by whom, in all aspects, and what's the best way to go about this? We went through a very difficult period of time where we had, diesel generators running all over neighborhoods. We had another incident that I don't think we have to go into, where you've got diesel fumes spewing into the atmosphere. I think that there are ways that we can do this in a green way, in a thoughtful way. Sorry if I seem disorganized in my thought, but I have too many questions, and there needs to be further analysis on this, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson and Kavanagh.
I'm trying to organize my thoughts as well, because now I feel like what I'm speaking for or speaking against is some kind of rational and reasonable approach to this problem, when in fact I feel that my interpretation of it is also quite reasonable and rational, and is also thoughtful. So I guess I'm just trying to get organized here. So I think what we're talking about, in my estimation, is quality of housing. And we want to ensure as a city that we provide equitable, safe, supportive housing that creates dignity for everybody. And that is somewhat of a value. We might not always be able to cost analyze it, but I did try and do some homework and connect with some of my nonprofit housing partners to get their impressions of the bill. So I am trying to come to this with a certain degree of evidence and preparedness. And although there are aspects of the bill that in their implementation are less articulated, I don't know, not as fleshed out, I appreciate that. The nonprofit partners that I spoke with did feel like it was an appropriate step to be able to regulate housing for all. And that is the role of a government, I believe, when a private sector actor is not supportive of those values, we have the ability to weigh in. So that, I think, is what we're looking at. And that is why I feel like, especially with the amendment or the addition that Councillor Devine added, which gives those directions to staff, that this bill, or that this, now there's a bill and a motion and I'm getting them backwards, but the motion is supportable. I just feel like we can, in this instance, do something, that it is important for us to stand up for a quality of housing that we believe is important. And I guess I'll just leave it there and continue to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this is a very important discussion because this is about climate change, and this is about moving forward on something that could help a lot of people that was not thought of before. It was an afterthought, and going forward, we'll be asking for new buildings to work on this. As chair of Ottawa Community Housing, I did reach out as soon as I heard about the motion to Ottawa Community Housing to find out what they're doing. And there is, a cost, but as has been said by Ms. Pazza, that is what we have to cover is nonprofit housing. This is deeply affordable housing, needs help. But having said that, there is power in the high rises they have. So their missing links are the mid rises. So they have already they were doing okay on the high rises. So that is very important. Plus they had their own motion where they were looking at it themselves internally before this came along. So they were quite aware that this is an issue that they had to deal with in the future. Because so they saw that they had to prepare for this situation and that this is something that's coming down the line. So not with the timeline, but this happened after the derecho. So so they are already in that thought process, and it's very important. They understand protecting tenants, that's their duty, and they feel very strongly about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I had Councillor Devine next, but I'd prefer if you want to wait to the end after you've heard everything, and then you'll recognize you at the end. So Councillor Kelly and then Councillor DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair. And I just would like to take a moment to echo a lot of my colleagues' sentiments around the importance of protecting people in emergencies and ensuring quality of life, and particularly for those most vulnerable. And I think we all want to do that. And I think there's, and I'm certainly, a new councillor looking for ways to make a difference, as I know the mover is. He's passionate about protecting people and making sure the governments work for people. So I'm fully on board with that sentiment and would love to work with my colleagues in that regard to increase protections for people. And I get the sense that sometimes and I fall into this as well, when we think about landlords, we think that they're all really big companies and they're all powerful. And I would guess that a lot of the owners of these big buildings downtown are, but I've also had conversations with other stakeholders like Ottawa Community Housing and know that this will come with a cost that's potentially in the tens of millions of dollars for people like that actually serve the most vulnerable people in the city. So I think there's a lot of nuance to this conversation that may or may not be getting missed when we frame it in the context of a private member's bill from Queen's Park. So I think that's the part that concerns me and the part that makes me uncomfortable. So there is a private member's bill being discussed here that will put cost on community housing, and because it is a private member's bill, as been discussed, there's no way to put in that legislation any funding mechanisms for those stakeholders. So I think while we would be putting the onus on a lot of larger landlords and investment companies, I know that's been in the news a lot lately about the percentage of buildings in our country that are owned by investment companies, which I think makes people want to do stuff like this even more. And I would love to work with my colleagues on City Council to come up with municipal solutions to this issue, and of course work with other levels of government about it, or on it rather. But asking City Council to support a particular private member's bill, I'm not comfortable with that, but would love to continue the conversation outside of that context. So that's all I'd like to add to the conversation today. I think the municipal chamber is not the place to necessarily support or discuss provincial legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor DeRoche and then Dudas. Councillor DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's no doubt that the case has been made on the reasons why there should be effort in this area, but we don't have a lot of answers on how this would happen. And despite being very busy with the budget and focus on our city mandate, I did talk to a condominium board chair in my constituency and asked him how he would go about implementing this if a bill was to come into place. And he really wasn't sure. He had a lot of questions that I think we have today. How will we pay for this? What will be the timeframes? Will there be any incentive programs that would assist us in doing this? And he expressed a great deal of concern given all the many financial pressures that they have already in managing the condominium. And I really think that there needs to be much more analysis that goes into this to understand the cost, to understand the timelines, to understand the impacts on condominium boards, on tenants. I think it's logical to expect that this would be a significant cost and that there would likely be some flow through on rents and on the price of condominium fees. And when we are working very hard as a council to make affordability a priority, I'm not sure that helps us move in this direction. So I hope that the member of provincial parliament, works across the aisle at Queen's Park. I'm not sure why my views on this are helpful. I think the effort needs to be focused on to Queen's Park and on working across the aisle to get some progress in this area. And I also think that we should be using the good work of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Councillor Brockington is our representative. I'm sure will be a strong advocate in that regard. And what that association does is bring a very focused, a very coordinated with other municipalities effort. And I think it takes out sort of the nonpartisan element that creeps its way into the politics of Queen's Parks. So if people are in favor of this motion, I encourage them to write to their MPP. They're certainly free to do that as councillors. I won't be supporting this today because, again, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that I'm really not in a position to go back to the condominium board and say that I have answers. And I think one of the answers was, well, the engineers will figure out how you're going to do that. And I think we need much more than that type of analysis at this point in time. So for those reasons, Chair, I won't be supporting it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Judas.
Thank you. Actually, Councillor DeRoche summed up where I was going beautifully. I can't get over the fact that when one of the delegates was asked, mover of the private members bill, how was this going to get paid for? How will the cost not completely solely be borne on, the property owners or the renters that it trickles down to, or the folks that are, having to pay their condo fees? It was, don't worry, it's okay, it's going to work itself out. That was kind of, I'm summarizing that, I'm taking that out of context, but that's not a decision I want to make today. I do not feel that this is the appropriate level of government at this moment for us to be determining the outcome of this. I respect the fact that we are talking about the implications of climate change and its impacts on, our future to provide electricity to these places. However, I'm also thinking about affordable housing and how much additional cost this is going to be putting on groups like Ottawa Community Housing, Multi-Faith Housing, all of these groups that we partner with as a city to provide affordable housing, which we are in a supreme deficit of at the moment. We need to address how much additional cost does it put on their backs and on each and every project. We don't know that. And so I apologize to my colleague there. As much as I want to support the idea of this, the notion of this, in the absence of true information about how much this will actually cost, not partners in community services and housing providers, but also just the average renter, the person who has a condo, building owners who are trying to provide missing middle income or missing middle housing. I cannot support this. I think there's too much, and I apologize for the dog involved in the background here, but I do, once again, I think that this is a noble initiative. I don't think it belongs at this table as it is at the moment, and I cannot support it today as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Judas. Anyone else for a first time? Okay, Councillor Kavanaugh and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely disappointed to hear my colleagues and the lack of courage to support something that will help literally thousands, if not millions of people who live in apartment buildings. This is something that, as I pointed out, and I just sent a memo to that came in back in June after the derecho hit, that Ottawa Community Housing themselves were looking at assessing this situation. They were already starting that process, even though they had generators in many of their buildings. This is something that we have to show courage and well, Toronto's already done it, so we're not the first. But it's so important that I'm just gobsmacked about the idea that this is about money when people's lives are at risk. They absolutely are. If you had been in any of those buildings, you would have seen it. I'm absolutely amazed that no one died. Just amazed. And when a place like Ottawa Community Housing is already doing their own assessment months ago, right after the derecho, it shows the seriousness of how they take that. And of course, it's an expense. No one's questioning that. It's expensive to have a seatbelt before you had seatbelts. It's expensive to have fire alarms. It's expensive to have smoke detectors or any of the other things that save lives. But this, and as I pointed out, the city itself is doing this for our own infrastructure, having backup generators on major projects. So I think it's not looking at what's going to be the future. This is not a partisan issue. Private members business, and I've worked in that business for a long time back on the Hill, is about putting forward ideas that will inspire, because you're seeing things at the grassroots. And I hope that we'll see that ourselves and give support to something that will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Teresa Kavanagh, for providing an example of why I don't think we should be discussing private members' bills from Queen's Park in Ottawa, because they instantly create divisiveness around the table. So we just heard that we lack courage because we're not supporting a NDP private members bill at Queen's Park, which I know has upset me and some of my other colleagues, which is now limited our ability to work together as municipal politicians who should not be venturing into partisan politics to actually create meaningful change for the people of Ottawa. So I don't like hearing that because I'm not supporting one particular private members bill in Toronto, that I somehow lack courage in wanting to help the people of Ottawa when they need it. So I think that's a great example of why we should not be venturing down this path, and why you'll never see me put a motion forward to support any partisan initiatives at other levels of government. And I think that we don't lack courage as a municipal group and as a council and as a committee to come up with meaningful ideas on how we can support those people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradley, I saw your hand go up. Did you withdraw your hand?
No, I guess I'll keep it up. I guess I just add that I'm also surprised with support for this motion. I think that Dr. Ashdown's presentation so aptly demonstrated the need for this bill. The cost of not doing this is also high, whether it's drawing down on our emergency services or our public health resources. There's a cost. So I think it's important that we support this motion today, and I want to thank Councillor Devine for putting it forward for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. So colleagues, I'd like to give, here we go. Sorry, I'll recognize Councillor Hubley and then I'll go to Councillor Devine. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, for the last minute hit on the button. I'm looking at a message that just came out from Councillor Kavanagh in the email that has to do with how Ottawa Community Housing is looking at this, that they want to go away and figure out what the prices are. So I'm just wondering, is that motion that I'm assuming Councillor Kavanagh is moving, doesn't that conflict with what her statement said? So if possible, I'd like to get some clarification on this motion from Community Housing.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just turn to Councillor Kavanagh just to remind us this was moved last year, and if you can give some more context.
This is the board of Ottawa Community Housing had moved this and it passed. This is within Ottawa Community Housing. It's not with the city. They were looking at it internally. It's not.
And do they have prices? Do they know what the cost will be? Because that's one like several of our colleagues are raising very valid concerns about the impact Ottawa Housing as an example.
I sent a copy of the motion to the chair and to the clerk, and he can circulate it and you can read it. It's already been circulated. Yeah, and it's about investigating the costs because they're seeing this as the future. This is something that needs to be done after what was experienced, and understanding that this is part of what we have to do with climate change.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for indulging us in that. So we don't have any answers then from on the impact of this bill, if or this motion supporting a private members bill. If we go ahead with this today, we don't have the impacts on Ottawa taxpayers or the Ottawa Community Housing in case there's something that the province comes out with to help with this, because there's no disputing that something needs to be done. I think from what I'm hearing in this debate is that a fair number of our colleagues are rightfully raising the concern that we need a little more information before we make an empty commitment to going ahead with this if we can't afford to do it. And if we can't afford to do it, I would hope there's some sort of effort can be made through other partners to find a way to do it. But before we vote on that, I would like to have some of that information. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I do want to complete this item after Councillor Devine speaks. So is there anyone else that wants to comment, ask questions?
Mr. Chair, I would just ask that we avoid in future, leveling disparaging comments for the opinions of other members of the committee. I think that we need to redouble our efforts to working together. And I really would like to give Councillor Kavanaugh the opportunity to withdraw our comment if she wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Well, Councillor, I did not see it that way. I do agree with your comments that we're all trying in the spirit to work well together. And I think Councillor Kelly's comments were heard and noted as well, but I'd prefer not to get in the back and forth right now. I think we've all heard each other. We all agree what the spirit of working together needs to be, and I would prefer just to park it there for now. Councillor, on this matter, do you need to speak further on this item?
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to highlight. I genuinely think that there is a lot of the Venn diagrams that overlap here in support for this cause. The issue here is the process, and so I certainly don't feel any ill will for any of the difference of opinion, because for me the difference of opinion is on process. It's not on the effect for residents of Ottawa. And in fact, I'm encouraged by the discussion I'm hearing in the vigor about the care that we want to apply to the members, to the citizens of Ottawa. So I just want to say thank you again for the discussion. That's all.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, Councillor Devine, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues, I recognize I did not anticipate that my motion would, stir up this level of debate. I recognize that there's strong feelings on both sides of this. For me, this is not a cause. This is not me operating on sentiment as a new member of council. I have a fundamental role as a councillor. Like, my first job as councillor is to do everything I can to ensure the safety and well-being of my constituents and my residents. That's my job. I also have a mission statement, and my mission statement is that as our city is growing in population, I must do everything I can to ensure and support that growth in a way that is responsible, effective, forward-thinking, and just. As I look forward, we have more and more climate events coming. We will be building more and more tall high-rises in an unregulated market where this will just continue. So those are my concerns. As to speak to some of the comments that my colleagues have made, and I very much appreciate being the passion and detail behind them. So there were comments about that this matter, the issue of the implementation of these generators need to be studied and assessed. I recognize that it does need to be studied and assessed. It's already been studied and assessed to the point that the implementation of generators is the model under the National Building Code, which is the gold standard. That code is researched and developed by Canada's National Science and Research Agency, the National Research Council. No disrespect to the scientists and engineers at staff, but I think it's already been studied and assessed to the point of our highest levels of scientists saying we need this. As to the motion, as to the question about let's turn this back to staff and see what they think about it. It's built into my motion. I'm not sure to what extent my motion has been reviewed, but my motion is asking for basically two things: that we support a provincial action and that we turn this back to staff to study it. I'm already asking for what you want to do. In my questions to staff, and this is, I mentioned this earlier, I did my out of responsibility to staff and not making them work harder than they have to work. I asked General Manager Ayotte, I asked Chief Hutt, I asked Interim Chief of Planning Don Herwire, if they support this motion, to which they said, yes, they do. They see a need for this. So my colleagues are asking me to turn this back to staff so that staff can tell us what they've already told us, that they need this, that this should be harmonized for the sake of the city. We're hearing a lot of my colleagues speak about, defending the interests and rights of Ottawa Community Housing, and I respect you looking out for their interests. The chair of Ottawa Community Housing is here and saying that there's no objection from Ottawa Community Housing. If Ottawa Community Housing were as concerned as we say they are, they probably would have come here to delegate. We're not hearing any objection from Ottawa Community Housing. We're speaking about costs that have not appeared yet. We're speaking about, the anticipated cost on renters, the anticipated cost on builders and developers. These are fiction, not fictions, but these are undefined things. We don't know what they might be. Right now, there are no funding models because there's no demand for funding models. If and when the province does its responsibility and enacts this legislation, then there will be demand for such action. And then, as often the case happens, funding will present itself because the market will demand it. The only cost, and I very much, I appreciate that my colleagues are speaking to the cost that this will have on the industry, on the clientele. But as we've heard today, I also want to ask of you, are you willing to bear the cost of inaction? Are you willing to bear the cost of what happens should we delay action on this and go another year without any real implementation? What will the cost be there? There will certainly be a cost to people's well-being and feeling of safety. There could be a cost to lives. There will certainly be a cost to the services that our city has to provide because this stuff is not put in place. So thank you for having this debate with me. I look forward to your vote.
Thank you, Councillor Devine, for that. And colleagues, I'm going to suggest that we vote on items 1 and 2 first together, and then we'll split off item 3. Item 1 is that we express our support for the bill. Part 2 basically is that we write letters to various individuals, entities. And then part 3 is that we're asking staff to review what Toronto's done and to report back in Q3 of 2023. So I will ask for a recorded vote on this matter. Again, we'll vote on items 1 and 2 together first, and then a separate vote on item 3. Mr. Committee Coordinator, please, items 1 and 2.
Councillor Luloff?
No.
Councillor Dudas?
No.
Councillor Kelly?
No.
Councillor Gower? Oh, sorry. Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Councillor Devine?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor DeRush?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor Hill?
No.
Chair Brockington?
Yes.
They have 6 yeas, 4 nays. I may have missed somebody. Councillor Plant? That's still 6 nays, 5 yeas.
The vote was 6 no, 5 yes. Does that matter is defeated? And then the vote on matter 3 of the motion? Recorded vote as well.
Councillor Luloff?
Sure.
Councillor Dudas?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Plant, Conseillère Plante?
Oui.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Councillor Devine?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor DeRoche?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hill?
Yes.
And Chair Brown?
Yes.
11 yeas.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Councillor Hill, for bringing this to our attention. Next on our agenda is in-camera items. Are there any in-camera items? Seeing none, notices of motion. Seeing none. Inquiries? None. Other business? I did ask General Manager Ayotte to provide us with a very brief update on the matter this morning in Orleans. I think it's appropriate for this committee to hear what has happened and what the City of Ottawa's response has been to the explosion. So General Manager, please.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak on behalf of the emergency responders, and then I'd like, no, that's fine. Sorry. I was thinking of something else. On behalf of, so this morning we had a very serious incident in Orleans, an explosion that leveled several houses that were under construction. Several Minto workers were in and around the area and needed to be rescued. Those rescues have taken place. I have no update at this point in time on medical conditions. The matter is still under investigation with regards to what the cause of the explosion is. There is the possibility of natural gas and or propane being at the site, which is a possibility. However, until the investigation unfolds, we don't know what the actual cause is. So we have to wait until that takes place. The resources from the provincial government are already on site, from the Fire Marshal's office to assist with the investigation, from TSSA, which is Technical Standards and Safety Authority. They look at gaseous explosions, etc. Ministry of Labor is also on site, along with our investigators and police. So I have no doubt there's going to be a comprehensive investigation into the cause. This explosion was vicious and it caused damage in and around the area. And we're also assessing the structural integrity of some of the houses that were in that neighborhood to see if they are inhabitable. Following that assessment, families will be allowed to return to those structures if possible, if it's safe. And if not, they'll be advised accordingly. So stay tuned. There'll be more information. There is a media scrum happening right now at the scene, whereby the fire chief and others will be providing an update as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can based on the limited information I have.
Thank you, General Manager. We realize it's still at the infancy stages of responding to this, as you say, significant incident, and we appreciate the update. Councillor Luloff, please.
Just wanted to say thank you very much for all the information that you've been passing on to us through Councillor Kitts, who I believe is also on the scene right now as well. This obviously really shook literally the East End this morning. Glad to hear that everybody seems to be okay, and just thank you very much to all the first responders that are there on the scene today. Looking forward, to finding out why this happened and to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But it's always good to know that our first responders here in the city of Ottawa are able to act so quickly. Within I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes of hearing the explosion this morning, we could already hear lights and sirens and people on the way to respond. It speaks very well to the incredible work that everybody at EPS does. So again, thank you very much, Mr. Ayotte.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to highlight Jim Ayotte from an investigation perspective. You may be interested. I've had 2 construction-related fires in my ward over the last couple of months as well. I don't think there's any relation there, but just from an investigation due process perspective, that's probably of interest.
Certainly, and for your benefit, through you, Mr. Chair, the investigations are joint investigations. They're very comprehensive. They require a lot of forensics and very detailed kind of engineering work. And as a result of that, they sometimes take months and up to a year. That being said, we appreciate your information. Also, the police are heavily involved in these investigations in the event that there is any, crime or other activity taking place. So I'll be happy to pass along that information as well.
Thank you, and thank you for that update today. Any other business? Seeing none, given that the business of this meeting is concluded, are we adjourned? Adjournment. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Good job, Chair.